afternoon. The Rule Development Workshop and Board Workshop is now called to order. Pam, roll call please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Mrs. McDougall?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
And Mrs. Campbell? Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will begin the Rule Development Workshop, which is the public's first opportunity to address the suggested revisions to policies. Mr. Robin Novelli, Chief Operating Officer, and Christine Rodriguez will be providing us the executive summaries of the purchasing policies.
All right, good afternoon, Board. Christine is unable to be with me today, but Ritter is here. We have additional questions that she can handle. Last 2 weeks ago, we took a look at the work session of these policies, and I'll read through the summary here for you. This policy is being revised to clarify and define the general procurement requirements, procurement methods, cone of silence, agreements, approval and signature authority, and authority to debar or suspend, and other changes in compliance with applicable Florida law. Particular areas of revision include the following: title change from purchasing to procurement and contract services, in order to more accurately identify the purpose of the policy, defining procurement methods, including competitive solicitations, alternate source contracting, direct negotiations, competitive solicitations waived and not required, electronic procurements, federal grants funds, purchasing cards, purchasing orders, advance payments, cone of silence, solicitation of award protests, defining agreements and required reviews, setting forth approval and signature authority for board and delegated authorities, and establishing authority to debar or suspend. The new revised policy will incorporate board policies 6330, 6423, 6460, and 6540, which are being recommended for repeal to incorporate all procurement-related policies into one policy for transparency and consistency. And the proposed revisions encompass suggested language from Neola.
Thank you, Mr. Novelli. Before I ask for public comment, does any of the board have any questions or comments? Is there anyone who's come to address the revisions to policy 6320, purchasing? Is there anyone who's come to address the revisions to policy 6320, purchasing? No, I have to go through the repealed policies. Is there anyone present who wishes to address the repeal of policy 6330, acquisition of professional, architectural, engineering, landscape architectural, or land surveying services? Is there anyone wishes to address the repeal of policy 6330, acquisition of professional, architectural, engineering, landscape architectural, or land surveying services? Is there anyone here present who wishes to address the repeal of school board policy 6423, use of purchasing cards? Is there anyone here who wishes to address the repeal of school board policy 6423, use of purchasing cards? Is there anyone present who wishes to address the repeal of school board policy 6460, vendor relations? Is there anyone present who wishes to address the repeal of school board policy 6460, vendor relations? And is there anyone present who wishes to address the repeal of school board policy 6540, vendor relations?
Consultants.
Which is 6540 consultant agreements.
6460 was last time vendor
Yes,
relations.
this is
6540 is consultant what?
Consultant agreements.
Consultant agreements. Is there anyone present who wishes to address the repeal of school board policy 6540, consultant agreements? Ms. Moore, would you please provide the executive summary on policy 5500, student conduct? Thank you, Mr. Novelli.
Absolutely. Policy number 5500, student conduct. This policy is being revised in order to be in compliance with Senate Bill 7030. Particular areas of revision include the following: zero tolerance, threats to school safety, and assessor reporting. These proposed revisions encompass the suggested language from Neola.
Board members, before we ask the public, is there any discussion or questions you have on policy 5500? Ms. Belford.
I would just say thank you for cleaning up that formatting. I think it made it
Way easier to read.
way easier to read, yes, and
what she said.
much less confusing as to what was referring to what. So I appreciate you all putting the extra time in on that, and I know it was kind of a last minute. You guys had to hustle, so I appreciate you making it happen.
And everybody's good with the calendar year?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Susan, you good
Yep.
with the calendar year?
Yep.
Okay. Is there anyone present who wishes to make comments concerning the revisions to board policy 5500, student conduct? Is there anyone present who wishes to make comments concerning the revisions to board policy 5500, student conduct? That concludes the rule development workshop, which was way easier than last time. Thank you, Ms. Moore and Mr. Novelli.
Go fast.
Run while you can. Yeah, it's 9 minutes. Good job, guys.
To be here.
What?
Okay, so you
I
have to be there.
I would like to drive if I can.
We don't have to vote on anything.
Let me
so.
disconnect this one.
We will move into our board workshop. First, we will hear from Dr. Beth Teddy, Deputy Superintendent and Chief Human Resources Officer, who will provide us information on substitutes. Dr. Teddy.
We need 1 second to switch the driver. And I can't find it. Go to connect. Yes, go to connect. And then disconnect. There we go. Thank you. And then I've got to wait for it to show up for me. Okay, sorry about that. Back in July, you, at a board meeting, made the request to talk about substitutes. We've been having some issues with, well, actually lots of issues getting substitutes in our schools. So I have with me 2 of my staff members, Michelle Schrader-Weave and Elise Stacco. They work with substitutes among a lot of other things, but they helped me put this presentation together, get the data in a format that we could use it, go through and get some percentages. So I invited them to be here in case you all have questions that they might be able to answer that I can't. On the agenda, we are looking at our 3-year fill rates comparisons for schools under 80%, fill rates for last school year, pay rate comparisons for 10 counties, the historical pay scale and total substitute expenditures, hard to fill days of the week, which we just have for this year, but it's pretty consistent with previous years, proposed incentives and recommendations. For the north area, in the north, the schools are based, the north, central, and south, based on the old model of our area offices, so some of them are a little out of sequence. But you can see that Madison in the north area for the last 3 years has consistently been under 80%. They continue to be under 80%. In fact, Madison, as of today, is at 58.7%. I have talked to Joe Flora, and it's a challenge for him to find subs. And what happens when he can't find subs is other teachers cover the classrooms, coaches, literacy coaches cover classrooms. Same thing in the elementary school. They either split classes or
They have people who are not directly assigned to students all the time covering classes. They have substitutes who are in the building covering on their planning period. So it is a difficult situation for the schools. And you can see Madison was on there, has been on there the last 3 years, Mims Elementary for the last 2 years, and Oak Park, and Challenger 7 this year. Challenger 7 has fallen off though. I don't know if that was just an anomaly last year or not. In the central area, we have Endeavor, Gulfview, and Saturn as fairly consistent.
Holy smokes, why would Saturn go from 78 to 66? That's a huge.
It just depends on what's going on in the school. It could be, leaves, it could be, more people out. There are a lot of reasons why schools need substitutes, because keep in mind, substitutes aren't just because somebody's out sick. They're for professional development, all sorts of different reasons.
It dropped in total by 200.
Yeah,
But
the
it
need
increased.
dropped a ton.
So it
but
would be-
that's weird. That's
Right.
a weird.
Well, it's not if you have substitutes that start talking about behavioral issues and things like that, and they decided they don't want to go back to school, then
Right. No, even the need. Look at the number in the need at Saturn. In 17-18, they needed 547 filled, and in 18-19, they only needed 385. So they needed a lot less.
Right.
Do we know why Saturn dropped over 100 days or whatever?
No.
They
no.
didn't implement some like reward if you show up teachers for more
Yeah.
days or some kind
Is that
of.
capturing the ones that, and I'm sorry, would that be the one that, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, go ahead. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Is that capturing the ones that we have a substitute, but we need a substitute and we know that Johnny, Susie, and everybody else can cover it? Or is that every,
It is
Meaning
as
that even if
good
they're
as
getting-
the data in the system.
So
I
it
will
could
tell
be
you
good.
that. It's as good as the data in the system. It came to my attention probably in February of last year that not all schools were consistently using SmartFind. We all, as principals, had our favorite substitutes who seemed to be there every day, and sometimes those bypassed the system. That was communicated to principals, so some of the data looks a little bit off because some schools went up, some schools
Sure.
went down because we were asking them to be really consistent in reporting their absences. But I don't have the data on why a school would decrease that number. It could be in year 17-18, Saturn had a lot of absences, illnesses, professional development for that school that pulled teachers out. It doesn't matter how they're paid, they're all listed in here. So even if it's something we've pulled a teacher out for training or anything like that, it's going to be reflected in here. So this just isn't just about somebody being out of the building, taking care of an illness of their own or their child's illness.
This could also be vacancies.
It can be. There could be, and Saturn Elementary School at the beginning of last year versus the beginning of this year, the vacancies come and go. Every school has vacancies.
So Mark,
Nearly
can I
every
ask
school.
you a question? Is this the time when some of the boundaries were changed, 17-18? When some of the kids from another?
I don't
I don't
think so.
remember
It's
that
fine.
changed.
We didn't have any boundary changes for Saturn,
Yeah, we did.
did we?
Yeah, we did.
Then it would have been 17-18.
So that
That's
could
a good
be
point.
why that might be a little bit higher than in 17-18. But yes, some of the boundaries did change then.
Why were the boundaries change
A different population of students that came in.
But you have to think too, if you have a vacancy for a month, that's 30 extra days that.
Right.
Well, this is a whole year almost of reduction, 152 days.
Yeah.
So you're saying that if a different demographic group of kids come to the school, that it's going to create a less or more need for substitutes?
I'm not making this, I'm just saying that this
I
could be
couldn't
one
follow it.
impact.
It makes sense, I just don't know where that thread.
No, that may have had an impact versus now, it dropped because I think people are more settled in, and I have no idea. But quite frankly, that could have had an impact when the boundaries changed, because perceptions are interesting when the boundaries change. And some of the kids that came in, the perception would be different than what the current population was in Saturn.
If I could add, Saturn had quite a few vacancies, so unfilled positions. So I believe, Ms. Campbell, you're right on that some of it was that we had vacancies.
More
and we put
vacancies
a teacher
and
in those positions. Because that's what the school started with, trying to fill that gap until then they took Title I teachers and made them classroom teachers. They also had a couple of severe illnesses and teachers were out for a while.
Yeah, it could mean one teacher
Right.
could be
I mean, a lot of
adding
different
quite a
things.
bit.
Yeah.
Because they would use a sub even while they're waiting to fill a short-term
They
contract.
would, they would. Once a short-term contract is filled, the substitute cost isn't there unless that teacher is out as well. But all of those have impact.
Didn't expect to get hung up that long on that slide, did
That's
you?
okay, that's okay. In the South area seems to have a better opportunity for fill rates than the North and the Central area, but we still looked at schools under 80%. And for this year to current, we still have Palm Bay Elementary on the list at 74.3. Southwest Middle is on the list at 74.7. Harbor City at 76.4, and Jupiter at 79.8.
Okay, say this again, because when I looked at this, I'm like, where's Southwest? Because I know they've had a really difficult time. So they would fall under currently from the beginning of the year to now, is what you're
Just
saying.
from August till now
Okay.
is where they came up.
What was their percentage again?
Right now, they are at 74.7.
I think it's on one of the upcoming slides.
It is, and by the way, I made a few changes from when you received this.
Oh, okay.
Over the weekend, I did make some changes. I added a couple of slides, and then based on some conversations, I actually added something else today.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the slide. They look a little bit wonky, but these are the tops, the schools in whatever color that is. Are the schools that in the North area that had the most difficult time with fill rate last year. Central area, you can see it's the same schools we've already talked about. The other schools that are highlighted, if you look at those, they have more jobs, and they have a higher percentage of fill rate, but they have more jobs, so the percentages look off. But regardless, anytime we do not have a substitute teacher in a classroom where the classroom teacher is absent, we're impacting instruction. And this is, are you able to see that? There. And this is the South area. And this was for last school year. Okay, Pam?
So
I-
Southwest was already, even last year, was right on the edge of
There we go.
what we're looking
I
at.
thought I was frozen, I'm sorry. This is a slide you did not have in your presentation this weekend. This slide shows schools below 80% fill rate for school year 18-19, and I've colored them based on the area. So the green is the north area, the yellowish gold central, and the blue south area, and that's again for 18-19. We call those priority schools. I don't want to confuse the word priority school with what we know from Leading and Learning of priority schools. These would be schools that fall below 80% in being able to fill their substitutes. Again, the data is as good as what's in the system.
Challenger should actually be green.
Yes, it should. Yes, it should. Thank you.
Just an observation, any of these schools not Title I?
What are the colors?
No, I mean, I was looking at the top 10 in each one and trying to find an anomaly.
Is Madison Title I?
Croton's the only
Yes.
central.
Well, they missed Title I by one student, but they're.
They're borderline.
They were last year, I believe.
You take the top 10 into all of them, and I think there's only one that's not Title I.
On this, are you on this page?
Out of all three of them.
Which page are you on?
No, out of all three fill rates, and
Right.
the top percentage of filled, none of them were Title I except for Croton in the center. All the rest of them are not
Oh.
Title I, meaning that, the anomalies on the other end too,
Right.
that you're getting at.
I think overall, getting subs in schools is difficult, overall.
Also, you're not gonna see middle schools be in the highest fill rate.
Right. Absolutely.
That's a
That's
hard
nature of the beast.
Yep. This slide shows you the historical pay scale for Brevard County. You can see it's been a long time since we've adjusted any hourly rates for substitutes in our county. We added in classroom assistant and support just for information, but this substitute study does not include them. And that was the other thing, we had to separate out that data, because when schools do use SmartFind for their for their instructional assistants, it's all lumped in, so Elise had to separate all of that out.
Hold on, what is the last column? Say that to me again.
Classroom assistant, like IAs. Instructional assistants.
I know what they are, I
Oh.
just don't understand how we're paying them $8.46 an hour, is that what? What?
Substitutes.
Substitutes.
This is substitutes.
Isn't minimum wage higher than that?
Minimum wages.
Like 10?
I think it's 8.46.
That's why
We're right at
we
minimum
had
wage.
this conversation last time. It went up to 8.46.
Yeah,
That's why
it's
when
a year ago.
Yeah.
Really? I thought minimum wage was higher.
So let me, I believe the last column is when we hire a substitute to fill a vacant IA. Is that correct?
Not vacant necessarily, but
Not
an IA
vacant.
who's gonna be absent.
Right, right,
Mhm.
right. That's what-
I just probably shouldn't have thrown it in there because it kind of muddies the waters a little bit, but we do have the opportunity to have substitutes for IAs. Schools don't do it often, but they're mixed in when they do.
Okay.
This slide shows what we are paying per day for the different degrees, and then what other counties are paying per day for the different degrees. You can see that we are typically higher for bachelor's and retired teachers than for our high school diploma and our AA degrees. Most of the other counties are higher than we are for those 2 degrees. There are some counties, you can see them on there, I believe there are 3 counties listed there that employ their substitutes through Kelly Services. A request came in to break it down by hourly rate, so we did that with the caveat that the data collected for Lake, Pasco, Polk, Seminole is determined just by dividing by 7.5, as they don't list hourly rates, they only list a daily rate. So, just so you know, that's how we came up with the information. Our total substitute expenditures from 2016-17 through 2018-19, you can see there have been fairly consistent. 2018-19, this data were retrieved on July 1st, 2019. So it was prior, these are pre-closed numbers. I don't have the final numbers. I expect it'll be closer to $3.8 million for 18-19, but it's still fairly consistent with the other 2 years. This was just a slide we threw in. It doesn't really tell you a lot, but the idea behind it is Fridays are typically going to be our most difficult days of the week to fill. We also have problems filling days that are before holidays, before Monday holidays. I anticipate we'll have problems Thanksgiving week filling substitute positions. Those are always on there.
Except
There-
that cabinet is helping.
I'm saying not on the 25th, and some board members.
And so the subpool will jump on those days by 15 or 16 people.
It'll be
Which
great.
will solve
So-
all the problems.
I'm sure those, lots of positive people.
So by way of information though, just so we all know, I don't know how the other counties do it, but if you work as a sub on an early release day, you do only get 6 hours and a quarter. You do not get the full 7.5. So, and some schools, if you, like, let's say for example, elementary schools, you have to report at 7:30, the kids get out at 2:30, and you don't sit there and wait to sign out till 3:30. You sign out at 2:45 or 3, then you only get paid for 7 hours that day. So you're actually just getting paid, you know, that's one of the reasons why I had you put the hourly rate, because it does,
Makes
it
a
makes a difference when you're making $12.50 an hour.
We have a couple of incentives that have been in place in BPS for many years. One is a discount for childcare, just over 50%, and the other is a Bencor account. That if they are no longer a BPS employer, they become a teacher, they can or become a regular employee, doesn't have to be a teacher, they can withdraw that money. So those are 2 perks. In researching for this presentation, Elise and Michelle looked at a lot of other districts. I looked nationwide to see what school districts are doing for substitutes. And there are a couple things, and one thing I'm not addressing in here is the teacher absence piece of it. Now obviously, without teacher absences, we wouldn't need substitutes, but there are all, like I said, all sorts of reasons why we have teacher absences, from professional development to illness to personal charge to sick to unpaid leaves. There are all sorts of reasons, but I found a lot of information about districts that are working toward incentives for teacher absences. That's something that maybe a phase 2 to talk about, but because this presentation is about substitutes, I just left it at that. So this slide just tells you a couple of things about, let me get myself caught up, hold on. This slide just gives you some ideas of things that we could potentially do. I cost them out for you in upcoming slides, and we'll talk about them. And then I rank ordered them based on cost, what kinds of recommendations we could potentially take forward. So a bonus day for priority schools, those priority schools would be schools that fall below 80%. That might shift depending on, I could run the data in a month, and I could have pretty much the same North Area schools. Mims, Madison will probably still be on there, but I may see some other schools jump into that. But if we were to determine as of a date certain what those priority schools are, I cost out for you, based on what we know now, $20 or $25 for a bonus per day for a priority school. A differential per hour, there was a suggestion of doing that. Some districts have done that, 50 cents or $1 per hour for priority schools. One local district just put in place, I think in August, a $250 supplement for teachers who were, or for substitute teachers who work 500 hours, which is equivalent to 62.5 days in the previous year, and agree to come back in the next year. They get a supplement, non-recurring supplement of $250. Another thought is a differential of $20 per day for a full day worked on days that are high absenteeism due to holidays or non-work days. Those would be, I have the dates in here. I don't want to go through all the dates with you, but they are like the Friday before Labor Day, or the Tuesday after Labor Day, the Friday before Veterans Day, or the Tuesday after Veterans Day. The Friday before Monday holidays seems to be one of those days. The days before we're going to be out on vacation, spring break, kind of thing. So that would be the days we're talking about. You may remember from the board meeting July 9th, we had somebody speak to you related to substitutes, and one of her suggestions was a meal in the cafeteria on days working. So I added that, it's a thought, and I'll show you what the cost is, and you can see. And then this came yesterday. This is a new item that I added in that I do not have costs on yet. I was not able to get these costs, but I'll break it down a little bit for you. One of our substitutes communicated that one thing we could think about is somehow reimbursing them for the cost to become a substitute. And he laid it out very well, with how much time it takes working to recoup these costs before you're even seeing any money for subbing. Right now we charge $20 for an online training if you don't have a teaching certificate, $71 for fingerprints and drug testing. I think it's $41 for fingerprints, $30 for drug testing, and a $25 substitute certificate application fee. And we've done this in other places. We're working through this process with our alternative certification program, looking at making that cost neutral to employees after they complete the program, so that they'll be charged something for that. But then at the end, if they make it through and they continue to work with us, we would reimburse the cost. It would be a similar process here. I just don't have costs to give you yet.
So what you're saying that I would do would be, once you've subbed for a certain number of hours or days, then you would be eligible to be reimbursed.
That would be my thought. It would not be I would not recommend an upfront payment. I would recommend once you've made it through 30, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours, whatever we determine to be the right number of hours, then we would refund you the money. And by the way, there was some of you will recall, the number of hours used to be 30. At some point last year, during the summer of 2018, the number was raised to 80. We moved it back to 30, although we did have a good number of subs who met the 80-hour requirement. We can use somewhere in between there if we were to decide. Once I get some numbers from, right now Elise has ET working with her to run some numbers on new substitutes. We just did not have them readily available in the system today. I'll be able to better tell you what that kind of thing would cost. So going back to the recommendations, the first recommendation you had on your list was the bonus day for the priority schools, $20 or $25. These are all estimates, because like I said, the priority schools, I could run it again at the end of the semester and I could get some different schools on that list, but just as a very rough estimate, you can see what it would cost at $20 or $25 for each of the areas. The differential per hour for priority schools, if we looked at a 50-cent increase, you're looking at about $14,000. If you look at a $1 increase, about $29,000. A non-recurring supplement of $250 for working 500 hours in the previous year. We had in 18-19 176 substitutes who would have met that. That would have been a $44,000 cost. The year prior we had a few more, 183, and that would have been a $45,000 cost, almost 46. A differential of $20 per day for a full day worked on days where the absences are high. Hold on now. For 18-19, that's at a $78,000 cost. At 17-18, just based on those numbers, so these are all estimates again, $76,000 cost. The substitute suggestion from July of a free meal in the cafeteria, I worked with Kevin. The adult meal at lunchtime is $3.10. The the adult meal at breakfast is $1.60. I did not include breakfast, I just included lunch. If we were to offer that as an incentive at all schools, you can see the cost is rather high. If you look at the total number of jobs, that's assuming that every single substitute who set foot on our campus would want a meal in our cafeteria, which is really very unlikely, I believe. So that's the highest it could be based on the numbers we have for those 2 years. If we only look at the priority schools, you can see the number is quite a bit lower. This is the one that the gentleman suggested yesterday that I don't have costs on. Again, it would require the development of parameters under which we would give a scholarship or give them back their money. It would be repayment after a specified number of hours. Let's say it's 50 hours or it's 70 hours in the year, with an agreement to return the next year. I think it's worth looking into, frankly.
And it would be theoretically just a one-time cost for a substitute, assuming they maintain the X number of hours required
Correct.
annually to not go through
Right.
the process.
Only for brand new.
Only for brand new substitutes. We would have to pick a date and start with that date. We wouldn't go back 2 and 3 years. We would just start with whatever that, if that were to be something we wanted to do, we'd start with that implementation date. And it is important to note that if a substitute drops below the 30 hours, they would have to start the process over. So the differential of $1 per hour for priority schools, approximately $30,000 cost. It's something to consider. I think that was something the board brought up at that meeting on July 9th and at other places when we've talked about substitutes. The non-recurring supplement of $250 for working 500 hours or more in the previous school year, 500 hours or more is quite a bit and would help us out a lot. I don't know, I have no way of knowing if we put all 1, 2, some of these recommendations in place, what we would get. But you have to assume that some that were close might choose to get to that point. So the $45,000 is just an estimate. $20 per day bonus for priority schools, that's approximately $78,000. Recommendation number 4, the differential of $20 per day on days that absences are high due to holidays or non-work days is about $78,000. I only listed for number 5, the meal in the cafeteria on days worked in priority schools. We could start there as a pilot potentially and then look at something different. And then number 6 is the reimbursement of fingerprint drug costs and other costs associated with becoming a substitute, and that would be an approximate cost of to be determined. My final recommendation would be to look at one or more of the previous things that we've had in these slides, beginning of potentially January 2020 or even waiting until the start of next school year, depending on the direction of the board. Evaluate our progress toward increasing fill rates and reevaluate where we stand with outsourcing and everything else that we do with substitutes moving forward.
Fabulous.
It is.
So what do you want from us today? Do you want what we think about all those recommendations?
I rank
individually?
ordered, yes, I rank ordered the recommendations, as you can see, pretty much by cost. So is there appetite to even look at these?
Before we jump to these, when we looked at the ones that we are currently offering, first of all, as a sub, I didn't know about either one of these.
Okay.
I knew my money was going into Bancorp. I didn't know that now that I'm not a sub anymore, I can actually take it out. Or maybe I can't because I'm still currently employed with CPS, I don't know. But the childcare, this was something that I actually asked about. I don't know. I think that we need to be shouting this a little bit more because I know, like, if you are a parent, I just think that that's a pool we can draw from is parents who are in that school, obviously. But if I subbed at a school where my children went, it was a little bit easier. Even though I had some that said, no, you can't have them like before school hours, you can't have them with you, or I didn't need to be on campus. That created a difficulty for me because if I didn't have a spouse who could bring them later, then what was I supposed to do with my children? But if I wanted to go sub at a different school, it also limited me because I didn't have this childcare available. So if my spouse couldn't come and pick up my kids or bring them to school, then I didn't. So I didn't know this. I would have possibly because childcare costs are half of your salary. I mean, I could make $93.75 a day, and the drop-in rate, it was going to cost me $45 to have my kids in childcare. I'm not able to stay home and cut coupons and make $45. So I think this would be something that maybe we can push out a little bit more. Maybe you guys are since I came on a couple years ago as a sub. So, but I think this is a big deal that we're already offering. I'd like to hear us advertise that a little better.
We can certainly do that.
I concur, because I subbed also, not as much as you, but I was a substitute before serving on the board, and that's the first I heard it. And I was in the same situation with my little guy at Indian Atlantic. I couldn't go far from that radius because when he got out of school, it would be nearby. So, okay, are there any questions for her before going on to what our thoughts are on the individual recommendations?
Can I back up a little bit and talk about, when I look at it, there's 4,277 non-filled positions in the 3 areas from last year. The majority of those are tied into our Title I schools, which then creates a drop of, education and everything else because we have substitutes that are filling. Have we ever figured out the cost that we're losing from the district in our Title I schools because our grades are not high enough because we have a high fill rate for do you see what I mean?
A return on investment, no.
The return on investment of lost revenues based upon the fact that we have substitutes in Title I schools at a higher fill rates. We don't have teachers inside those classes educating them. The other thing that I look at when I look at this is literally Space Coast Junior Seniors has 938 days that they have them substitute, right? We talked about full-time subs before. The one anomaly that we're not looking at here is how much is the sub budget for each one of these? Because in some schools, you're going to have a lot of people that are doing the AA degree, and you might have some schools that are using a lot of the graduates or current retired teachers and stuff like that, meaning that in some cases you may be able to hire full-time teachers in some of those instances to fill some of those subs. And the reason I was saying that is because the achievement gap is widened in our Title I schools based upon the fact that our fill rates are lower, are higher. So there's a lot of anomalies that are there, but the fear that I see, I guess is where I'm going with this, is that our areas that we're trying to focus on the most is in Title I, and it's the highest fill rates, and not
It's
fill
the
rates.
low- you mean
It's the lowest fill rates, right? And it irks me. And I didn't know if we ever looked at possible full-time subs to offset the cost. I know when you're talking about, when I look at these numbers, if you take 180 days and multiply it by the average, it's pretty close to being what we would pay a normal teacher minus the benefits.
Dr. Buddy, Ms. Klein would like to respond to
I'm
that. 'Cause
sorry.
I think we've tried.
The eyes in the back of my head aren't working.
They're not working. Mr. Season, I agree with you 100%, and we've tried that. We have given additional allocation to, for example, Endeavor for 3 years in a row to hire a full-time substitute.
We couldn't get one.
And we could not keep a full-time substitute. They would be hired, go through the process, and then find a job elsewhere in a teaching position or something else. So although it sounds wonderful, but in our climate of not having having enough people to employ right now. We were unsuccessful in Endeavor keeping someone in that position. Last year, they were not able to hire anyone in that position. Thus, you all worked in Endeavor last year, so.
So that's perfect, because that's where I was, kind of laid into what the next part was, is that, are we allowing teachers that cover the actual classes to get paid?
They get comp time.
To get comp time, but if we actually paid them, you would have a full-time teacher inside those classrooms that you could cover the class. So instead of having a full-time, I know I gave up 2 of my plannings. So I taught 5 of 7. I gave up 2 plannings so that I could get $1,300 each. I got $2,600 in a year. I gave those up to make extra money. There are teachers out there that would love to get paid, and you might actually be able to fill them with comparable teachers. And I know that the cost might be a little bit more, but the return on investment achievement gap is where I was trying to plug. Because I know that in many cases, that the substitutes that come in may not be the highest qualified person to teach the class that they're coming in to teach. And it might end up in a situation where there's an achievement gap. Not all the time, because we have great substitutes, but sometimes.
I think we might sometimes run into some inequity with our elementary schools, because frequently what happens with elementary schools is rather than one teacher covering another teacher class, what they do is they split them.
Yeah.
And so what would you do for those teachers who aren't losing a planning period, but they can't get nearly the instructional material covered because they have they have a class and a half.
So
So
because,
you have some inequity in how you're dealing between secondary and elementary.
but if,
You're
I
gonna
don't
give them
understand.
a half of a.
I don't understand. Well, I mean, if we could fill and fix the problems in secondary by possibly allowing them to get paid because of the system and structure that they have as a system, how does that create an inequity for an entire other system? I mean, I
Because
understand.
the elementary school teachers are also covering, they're just covering in a different way.
So you think it would be better not to move forward with trying to find secondary teachers only for the fact that the elementary school teachers wouldn't get the same opportunity?
I don't know, I think it's just more complicated than just solving.
I mean, we already do comp time, so we already have a system that registers
Not, you're
them.
recommending they work 7 of 7 and you pay them?
No, I'm recommending
Sure.
that in the new event that the teacher has the extra planning period, right now we have a system that if they go to cover a class, we're already registering them for a,
Extra planning period other than, so teachers.
so you have 6
No,
of
no.
You think
7.
there's some that are teaching 5 of 7?
No, you have 6 of 7, so I have an extra planning period every day,
You have
right?
one planning
One
period,
planning
one
planning
extra,
period,
you have
so-
one planning period
Right.
per day.
So what ends up happening is, when I was teaching, they'd call you and say, hey, so-and-so needs you to cover, come on down there. Now I go down there, and if I go down there and I'm inside that classroom, I am more comparable as a teacher than.
I understand that, but so
right?
you're saying they need to have the opportunity to work 7 of 7?
Well,
There's no break
or
at
just
all.
get paid. No, not work 7 of 7. You could go that direction. That's a great idea. But actually, we already have a system where if they're covering other classes, we're giving them comp time. So why wouldn't we just cover them and give them the opportunity to get paid for the hour that they're
Instead of
actually
comp.
covering? Because now you're driving actual teachers inside your school into their own classroom where they already know the kids and they're already there. And we already have a system in place that is actually giving them comp time. So if you want to argue that the discrimination piece, it's already happening
With comp time instead
with
of
comp
cash.
time as opposed to payment.
That may be a bargain issue. I'd have to look into that, because anything that affects wages ends up being a bargain issue, just like comp time is a bargain issue.
It's okay, and I
I
don't
just
think
need
that
to
we need to
throw
make
that
a
out there.
recommendation right now, but I
Yeah.
think it's I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I think one of the factors as we look forward to this is filling the achievement gap that we're losing, because that scares me, and it may be a good one. This rates, but the 4,277 focused specifically on Title I is a fear of mine.
Understood.
What do we do for elementary school teachers who, do we have something similar, who's saying, if they have to take a split class, there's no.
They don't get comp time or anything.
Okay.
So-
Jane, do you know that to be different than what I just said? Because I
No.
don't know it to be different.
No, they, if they lose a planning time, they get comp time.
Right. But if they just split classes, they don't.
And
So- But it's
we
the
are-
same thing in secondary. I mean, they're not losing, they still have whenever their kids are at camp or whatever, they still have a planning if they just
No.
So
divided a
if a
class.
secondary teacher is covering on his or her planning period, then no, that teacher doesn't have a planning period during the student day.
I'm talking about an elementary school teacher who's divided a class, they still have their same planning because their new extra 10 kids or whatever are following the same schedule as their kids. They still have planning, but they have 10 more kids.
we are working to avoid the split classes as much as we possibly can. In Title I schools, unfortunately, we roll out interventionists to cover classes.
I think there's a bigger issue. I think that's great that we're looking at this, but I think the issue that we also need to address is what incentives can we give our teachers who are working at our Title I schools or our schools that are, I say Title I schools, that will be politically correct, where our students or the population is maybe a little tougher. So how do we reward those? I mean, I've had a teacher who works at an A school said I would go to a lower grade school if I knew I was going to get an incentive to go there to help these students.
Are we talking about teachers or substitutes?
No, we're talking about teachers now.
Actual
I think,
teachers, if
to
there's an
me, I'm
incentive
thinking
to show up more
this is
days.
part of the issue
That's
of,
another
you know, how do you, what incentive do we have for our teachers to go to different schools and to stay in and not take, not
So
that they-
incentivize attendance
Right,
versus.
absolutely. Thank you
Yeah,
so
well,
much.
that
We've talked about, that as an option as well.
Because I do
That's what I
think
talked
that.
about in the beginning.
Yeah,
I
you
said
mentioned
I
that.
wasn't
You did mention
focusing
that.
on that.
Right.
Although I found some interesting information related to teacher incentives. The data, the analysis, the return on investment, that information is not readily available.
Right.
So it would be basically a test case just to see if it would work and if it had an
If
impact.
you remember, the union proposed a attendance incentive for 18-19, and we tabled it because we were just shifting how we were doing subs from school-based management to district, we were more
We wanted
district-based
to get some
management.
data on what we were looking at.
Correct, and we've not done the analysis of that, and now we'll transition, and finance will probably be next semester before we could
I
begin
think
to tackle
common
that, but
sense
it
tells me
definitely-
if their own teacher is in the classroom more often,
Oh, no question.
Right, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
That is an enhanced
That's a better
instructional experience.
situation than a random person appearing once every couple weeks and
Right.
showing up on something.
No question, and even
That's
of
with me.
greater
Yeah, a lot
value,
of data.
even then another teacher covering that class, because
Absolutely.
you know, there's still, it's still difficult to.
Here's another piece that I look at. When we look at all these incentives, we're like, okay, so we only have enough money for this one little area. So we're gonna do this across the board, which might only impact a small percentage of the overall problem. What if we, as we look at this, instead say, let's throw the multitude of them at a couple of schools to show if we can incentivize the whole thing? Because the problem that we have with our system is sometimes we're just taking forever to get to a point. So we put one of these incentives into our schools, we figure out that it had a little bit of push, then we put another one next year, had a little bit of push, so we end up 3 or 4 years down the line and we end up still with 4,000 kids out. When we are trying to gather data to make decisions on if it works, when instead, I would like the board to just think, maybe we incentivize 2 or 3 schools in the north with a lot of them to see if we get more of a push out of there. Does that make
It
sense
doesn't
to
look
you?
like we would even have to wait for, or just put it in the north. I think we could do, if we've got, how many is this, 9 or 10
We've-
schools?
We've got, I mean, she's
It's
given
10
us
of these.
options
10. We
to
could do this with
incentivize
these
Title
10
I schools in all
Right.
3 areas, and I think that's a great place
Or
to
the,
start.
the
with
priority,
multiple
yeah, I like that, but I like the idea of multiple.
I just,
You
you
don't
know, this is a
wanna see it
big deal. We've been doing this for 3 years now, and I just want something to show
So,
them.
question number 1 is, these look like great prices. How much money do we have to spend, Dr. Mullins?
I'm not prepared to tell you that today. We're still in negotiations with our bargaining
Yep.
and employee groups, and until that's complete, I'm not comfortable proposing a cost. But by the end of this semester, I think we can come back with a final recommendation. You know, one thing I'll add that we probably need to be aware of, and we may just need to do some piloting to determine what the overall impact is, but we have to be aware that maybe just incentivizing one area only shifts the subs we have to go to those schools, and we then create
Right.
other
Everybody in other
schools.
schools.
When really our ultimate goal should be, let's increase the number of qualified substitutes overall and keep everybody's fill rates at the 90+%.
I think if we incentivize the teachers on one end, that'll reduce it. I think if you incentivize, I think that's why I was saying, instead of just doing one, if we could focus it all and get it, but if you're saying that we have, you know, opportunity for all of us, then that's great too.
Okay.
One
let's go-
Have we ever asked the
Let's
substitutes
go
what they think?
down the line. I think we all have
Have we ever
opinions
just
on
asked the
what's
subs
the
like what would be
offer.
good for you guys?
To the best of my knowledge, we don't currently have a survey process for subs, although we've talked about it. Yeah, we don't currently have one, but we've discussed doing that, to get some information. We do get feedback from subs. Usually it's unsolicited feedback on something that happened or didn't happen at a school.
We have one that
But
has
we
to
don't
drive
have
the bus
a,
here. We have one that drives the bus here.
Rides the
Jordan.
bus.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna go down the line and start with you, Ms. Belford, on your opinions and questions and.
So I can ask questions? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thanks. So I noticed that you didn't make any recommendation for an adjustment to the hourly rate in any of the categories. Was that strategic in
did.
nature, or were you
There was
just?
a one
No,
dollar
I did for the priority schools. I did not overall.
right there.
I can certainly work that up pretty quickly.
But just in like,
Overall.
yeah,
Okay,
overall
right.
raising our hourly rate for substitutes.
That's definitely an issue. The other comment that has come from substitutes has been, if you look at this slide, we have bachelors, we have retired. We have substitutes in our buildings that have master's degrees or doctorates or specialists, and we haven't found a county that delineates based on that, but we've had requests from substitutes to consider looking, okay, I have a master's degree, I should make more than somebody who has a bachelor's degree. That's certainly something that we can look at.
Do we have any idea how the best way to break it down, but are the majority of our subs retired teachers or a bachelor's degree? Like how
Fill rates at each school
does
based
that
upon-
break down
Right.
according to the various high school diploma, AA degree, bachelor's degree, retired teacher? Do we have any idea?
I don't have any idea right now. I'm pretty sure we can collect that data, Elise. Can we or no? Is it not in there?
Each substitute's got
Or
to
just of our active ones, how many are in each?
Category.
We'd probably have to look at payroll data, and that's not data she can capture. It would be data I'd have to get out of financial services. We capture numbers, we capture what's in SmartFind. And like I said, the data I'm giving you is as good as what's in the system. So there's some swings there. There'll be some swings in schools. You'll see some schools that look really low. They may not really actually be that low. I just want that out there as a caveat, but we can certainly see if payroll can tell us, because I know their job codes and I know the substitute EEO code,
If you
and we
look
can
at
look at that.
your pay stub, it says sub, but then it gives you your step, it can put it under step. So if you have a bachelor's, so they should be able to do that.
I'm just not 100% sure, but they have to, because they pay them by the hour based on the degree.
That's a great question, and I think it'd be a valuable piece of data, because if we find that the highest percentage of our subs are bachelor and retired teachers, then we may want to target the dollars that we spend in a specific area, because those are very competitive. Bachelor and retired teacher pay rates are very competitive, so we'll
Right, because an
work with
increase in those
payroll.
areas might not attract anybody more. but
Correct.
Eight something dollars, right, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question, just because I don't know? Florida Department of Education, they don't have any guidelines about what degrees a substitute can or can't have? Okay.
We issue our own district
Okay.
substitute certificate.
Okay.
Ms. Belford, back to you.
For a lot of different reasons, I think that would be interesting data to have, to kind of apply, to
I've got it written down.
Guide-
with
guide where we go. I like so I know that you have listed them in order, and I'm not opposed to the order of recommendation that you put forward. The only thing that I would say is, for example, on recommendation number 1, if we're doing a differential per hour for our priority schools, I think going back to what Ms. Campbell referenced as to if you're working on an early release day, or if you are if you're leaving right after students leave, I think we would have to take that into consideration as well, because that, our per hour numbers would differ. And I would think that it would be harder for us, for our system, to process an adjustment in hourly rate at priority schools than it would be for a supplement, but I'm just,
So full disclosure, that is probably true.
okay.
That is probably very true, and if Jessica Mosca is watching this right now, she probably doesn't have anything nice to say to me.
Yes, so certainly I think we should, because that increases our cost substantially, right? If we have to do an enormous amount of system manipulation in order
Right.
to make that happen. So certainly I think that we should consider that. I think that all of the recommendations that you have brought forward are phenomenal recommendations, and I would be eager, quite frankly, to move forward with both surveying and potentially piloting. You know, if we have 3 or 4 priority schools in each area, perhaps we pilot one of these methods at one school, one at another. I mean, you guys can certainly figure out the best way to do that, but I do think that all of these could potentially assist, along with the other side of it, looking at the teachers.
I think it's important to see if we have any return on investment for, there'll be a return on investment for that individual, but is it overall a system return on investment? And so that's why we were focusing on priority schools as a, I didn't say the word pilot, but that would, instead of going out entire district-wide with a really large cost, looking at a smaller subset of our schools. And that came out of discussions with you all over the last few months.
We had spoken before about focusing on the north area first. That was specific.
I'm good.
Ms. McDougall?
Well, first, thank you very much, you and your team, for putting this together. I like all the recommendations, and I also would like to consider the one about whenever you pick a date, to start with our substitutes, to kind of have them work so many hours and then pay back the fingerprinting and all the upfront costs, because it is a lot. And I agree with Ms. Campbell, while she talked about, I didn't know we paid half, you know, money went to childcare, to give them a discount on childcare.
A little better communication
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. So I think that's a good idea. I also like the idea of a pilot. And I'm just gonna throw this out there. Is there a reason, oh yeah, I know the reason, I don't know, it's gonna be a goofy question. A flat rate. I mean, I see that other places do a flat rate.
They're doing a flat rate, but what you have to remember is that's the money that's going to the substitute. They're actually paying more for it because they're paying the markup cost for having, if you're talking about the
Oh, they're
3
doing the
districts.
Kelly thing?
Yes.
Well, I don't want us to do the Kelly thing, but a flat rate. I don't know why we couldn't look at a flat rate for like our retired teachers and our bachelor's degree teachers. I'm just curious, that's all. Like if this is what you get in a day. This is, you come in at this day and, you know, you can even put the substitutes on outside duties that I'm hearing that some of my schools are struggling with to cover the different gates that need to be manned and things like that.
So are you talking about increasing the
Yeah, that would be an
daily rate?
increasing, yeah, it would be.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah,
want to
that would
make
be
sure,
an
because they
increase.
do get a rate. It's not, everything can be broken down into an hourly rate.
Right.
So, okay.
Just food for thought. I guess it's more of a question. Why are we not doing instead of like an hour? Because I'm hearing that hourly, if it goes home at 2, they only get paid up to that time instead of just the flat rate. This is what you get when you come in. This is what you get when you substitute.
Oh, so you're not saying a flat rate between people with only a high school diploma and people with a bachelor's. You're saying a daily.
Like a daily
No matter
rate.
how long you end up having duty,
Yes.
you're
a
going
daily
to
rate.
make $90
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Except for early release day.
I get it. I get it, but yeah. Because that's the day that it seems Friday, early release day, a lot of people take
But
off.
that's a day that if they get, it's by exception. So if they put in the whole day,
Mhm.
and they stay that hour and they do other things in the school or whatever the case might be, they actually get paid for that entire day. Am I correct about that, Elise?
Okay.
If that's the way the secretary puts it.
And if that's what the sub wants to do, because
Right.
a lot of times they want to leave when the students leave,
Right.
so they would not get that,
All right.
that benefit.
And if it's the Friday before a holiday, they could potentially get an additional $20 incentive for being there the Friday before the holiday on top of it.
Right, absolutely. Anyhow. So I don't want feedback.
So I've got your suggestions, both of yours.
Okay, Mr. Susan?
Okay, so I would like to, just as Ms. Belford correctly indicated, move forward. I think one of the anomalies that I was looking at was there's 2 pay incentives, $25 versus the $1 an hour or 50 cents
Mhm.
per day. I would say that you could do $25 is significantly more of an increase, we know financially, but then also I think that really sends a message. And then possibly do the $1 an extra on the short days or the targeted days. So you have Title I schools, we focus on a $25 every time you go in there, and oh, hey, you get $25, and then if you go on the days that were targeted, then we're gonna give you an extra $1 per hour. That kind of gives a reason
In
behind it.
addition to $25?
There we go. With the off day, I also would like to see a back-end incentives implemented also. So although we may not be able to do it with the teachers union because we have to negotiate it, I'd like us to look at that absence incentive, because I'll tell you right now, I took advantage of it when I taught. I would not miss any days during the year so that I could sell them all back at the end of the year, the same type thing, right? I
So you
think-
recall what that was last year, right?
Well, yeah, I
Does
remember that
everybody remember what that
conversation.
was?
I wanted to tell you that I did it as a teacher. I stuck it out because I wanted to be able to sell it back, because it used to be able to sell back the 10 days that we didn't
Right.
go out.
We do still have that.
Right, so I just wanna say
Right.
it works for me, so I would see that, I would also say that if we could look at that, paying them for the planning, because I know it might create an inequity, but I think that it's already existing with the thing, so we can move forward with it. And I think that would help in those targeted middle schools that we already have an issue with. I would also like to look at why, and I have my own feeling on this, why Croton seems to be the only Title I school that was in the top 10 of all North, Central, and South. And I have a feeling that it's because we have a higher average years of experience at that school.
Either that or the AP is just running the
No,
class.
don't say that, because then she
Yeah.
get mad. No, but what I mean
That's
is
my exact
that
thought. I'm like,
I
isn't that where
think,
she is?
I think there's an
Yeah.
anomaly there because of the average years of experience. There's people that have been there for 35 years. They've had trees that they planted that are bigger than the school.
It'll be interesting to look at their absence, teacher absent rate. You may find that absent rate slide, I don't remember what the.
Well, and so is there an anomaly based upon average years of experience towards how many days off that they take during the year? And then do we have less experienced teachers at our Title I schools than we do at our non-Title I? And is that driving, that might be the ultimate driver in the end, is that the younger teachers are taking more days off or whatever that anomaly is. Because we may be throwing money at something and it might not work and we might have missed that
Well, our
data
teachers
set.
who have kids that they would have to stay home a lot. Those are the younger ones, those are the ones who have to take more days off, whereas people who have grandkids.
Where they have the Budweiser flu also.
This is in your, I will recall data we shared with, I think the last curriculum, L&L data. Did we share the teacher quality from the DOE or no?
No, we shared that with Cabinet and with you.
Okay, but you are absolutely correct. We've already looked at that data, and there is a higher percentage of less experienced teachers in our highest need schools.
Okay, so it exists.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yes, it's a substantial difference in.
Do you have it by school?
No, we have statewide data on the quality of teachers as defined by experience and other factors as they are in schools of high poverty or low poverty, or high minority or low minority. And there is a substantial difference between the schools in the higher poverty and higher minority on teachers with less experience.
So statewide? Or is that
Our
district?
data.
Our
Our
data.
We have
It's on
For
our
our
report.
So
county data.
could we
It's on the
possibly,
report card.
could you possibly break it down even further and get by school? Just so that you could see an anomaly by Title I if the,
I could not.
Okay.
There is probably a way, but I would have to do some cross-functional work.
okay.
I'd have to check.
Okay, and then 7.5% of BenCore, can somebody explain what that is? Benefits core, is that like some kind of benefits we're putting
It's
aside?
like FRS for subs don't have retirement
Social
plans in
Security.
FRS. So like it's going to Bancorp, and it's just, I can go in there and just like FRS, I can go in there and decide how I wanna invest it, but it's basically a retirement account.
Can we just not pay that and give it to the substitutes in a raise?
Isn't that their social security? Like we pay
Yeah,
that instead
Social
of
Security
Security.
substitute, I think is what it counts as
I think by law.
Can somebody tell me what's going on? Because I have 3 people yelling.
We are not yelling.
I don't think we're yelling.
Am I talking to them?
I wanna say.
Is BenCore required?
I don't think we have benefits here.
It's what we consider to be an incentive
Right.
as a savings plan for our substitutes.
But if we gave the substitutes the opportunity to take that 7.5% and roll it into their paycheck every single time, is that legal? Because then we could tap into a resource of money that we're not tapping into already.
I would have to talk to financial services
Yeah,
about
'cause
the
I
legality.
think that counts
I don't-
as your, I think you have to use something for retirement check, whatever, like Social
That's right,
Security, and I don't, it's.
But if you guys are able to pull it out whenever you want to,
Then you
then
might have to
what's the
pay.
difference between, I was wondering, if it's an anomaly, it's a pot of money that we can go after. And then what are we gonna do for the schools that have the discipline problems that we have subs running from, because we can throw all the money at those in the world. Do we have a plan? Have we figured out why some have higher discipline problems than other Title Is? Miss Klein back there, Miss Sullivan?
We need to start making parents substitute in the schools.
Yes, have their parents come to school with their children.
If your kid's expelled, then you should have to put 10 days.
We
of
are
work in.
Ms. Moore and her team are working with our risk ratios at our schools, and which is is that correct? A correlation to student behavior and discipline and that sort of thing. So they are working very closely with our schools that have high risk ratios and with plans on how to address it. So.
Okay. And then I did want to tell everybody so that everybody knows, the Kelly Services option has a fee on top of it. So when we look at that, when they presented this thing before, they tried to bury it inside the paperwork, but it has a 35% increased fee. And what they do is they drive, in order to keep the cost at the level piece, this is payroll 101, this is what they do, these PEOs and all these people, is they drive to the lower cost option for substitutes. They advertise those out to catch the cost so that they can get the increase in the backside.
Right.
So just remember that when we're going towards that option, because I keep hearing that thing come up and it gets me upset.
Well, I'm gonna.
No,
Can
okay.
I jump in? I want to click, because when Dr. Thetty was working on this and we were reviewing it, I said, so why aren't you proposing outsourcing? And her response was, because we haven't really done our own work to incentivize and determine if we can not spend as much to outsource and incentivize and get the return on investment. So
That's why the last recommendation says, let's put some of these things in place, whatever those things might be, at whatever schools they might be, see if we get a return on investment. And if we do, we continue down that path. If we don't, then we reinitiate the discussion of potential outsourcing. But you're right, there's a markup on every one of them, and it's between 20 and 35%.
So if you take that on $7.8 million, you're looking at between $2 and $2.5 million that you're going to be increasing it, which means that's not even, I mean, if we took $2 million and threw that as incentives towards our substitutes, I think our return on investment would be significantly higher. So I just wanted to remember.
Well, I'll be
I think
honest,
our total sub cost was
3.7.
3.7 million.
3.738.
Plus
37.
35% of
Right. It's $1 million.
that would be,
1 million.
wouldn't be a small amount of money.
So meaning that before we think about that, we can level the playing field. Okay, I'm sorry. And then, just like you said, move forward, I would love to see the surveys go out to the substitutes to find out what they think would be good. And if I could say, I would love to focus on the north area, if we have to choose north, central, or south, because that's what the direction of the board's been for 2 years. And this board may be a little bit different, but we made that recommendation 2 years ago, so that's it. Did I get everything?
Ms. Campbell?
All right, so one of the things that I wanted to ask is, we have, total substitute expenditures. I'm curious as to what we budgeted, because maybe some of the costs, because, if we're budgeting to fill all of our sub jobs every year, or are we budgeting what we've kind of spent?
No, there's a sub budget, and I will tell you right away. I didn't even look at that budget.
Okay.
I have not. I can get that very
So that,
easily, but I did not look at it.
Hopefully, we would,
No, I don't know.
So the crazy thing is, if we're successful in this endeavor, it's going to cost us more money, but it's going to result in better,
Keep in
instruction
mind,
going on.
there's a budget for subs. Schools
Right.
get a budget. Some schools overspend their budgets, and then
Right.
they
And it comes from those salaries.
they apply for forgiveness funds
Right.
to fund that. That's why Penny changed things this last year, and schools were no longer, as I understand it, no longer going to be able to keep what they didn't spend in substitutes, so she could get a better handle. So it may not be as easy as I'm thinking to just get a budget. I know that each school gets a budget for substitutes, but the process that I don't know about is that appeals process to get the money
I did
back.
have that conversation with her earlier in the year, and I know that she used the money that was left over to fund the appeals, and it was pretty much a wash. So whatever.
She did say that.
Yeah.
But she, as you know, because we hadn't done that process before, she didn't have an idea of what it would look like at the end of the year. So I'll have to go
Right,
back
right.
to her staff and see what's
Right.
there.
I'm just wondering what, could some of this extra cost that we're looking at that we'll have, to do these incentives, can that come out of what we budgeted to begin with? I think these are some great ideas. I have some favorites, so I'm gonna share them with you
Yep.
from my perspective, and I realize that I'm just one ex-sub. But I think in general, a person who's doing this kind of job is looking for the temporary, the immediate benefit over the overall, the long-term benefit, because some of our subs are going to be subs forever. Some of our subs are just between job type subs, or just when it's convenient for me, as long as I get my 30 or 80 hours, whatever it is. So I think, to me, and also for the ease of use on our staff end, I think the daily bonus, I think I like that better than an hourly difference. Obviously, it's bigger for them because that's I think I calculated like an 18 or a 26, depending on whether we do the $20 or 25% bump on those days. So I think that's great. I mean, the 500 hours getting the $250 non-recurring supplement, but that's so much to keep up with. And honestly, I'm not sure which subs are really keeping track of. I worked 500 hours, or I'm clear. I mean, if we were communicating with them, hey, you're at 450 if you get up to because those teachers who are working those hours, they're probably already going to do that.
Well, and you saw it's not a lot of subs. It was,
Yeah.
I think, 173 this past year, 180
But if we
something.
have to pick and choose, because we only have one pot of money, my favorites are number 3, the $20 bonus for priority schools.
Not 25?
I'm trying to be reasonable. I think, hey, $20 is, for a daily rate,
Right.
going from
$20 is a
93
very
to
good incentive.
130, that's pretty good. I like number 5, the meals in the cafeteria, because it's not gonna cost $114,000. Some days I eat in the cafeteria. I'm one of those people who's not afraid of cafeteria food. I've never been afraid of cafeteria food, but a lot of people are. So
It came directly from one of our
I
substitutes.
know it.
So.
And so if we just hand them each day a little, here, go get a free meal or a cookie. Use your pass and just get a cookie. It won't cost the district $3.10. Cost them $50. But something to go get something. Those little things, again, it's the immediate. I think those kind of things are beneficial. And again, it's a job where you have to think about the cost for you to work. So for me, the childcare cost kept me from working days when I didn't have someone to pick up my kids in a different school. For someone who is working a job where they're maybe only making $8 an hour, the cost of lunch, that's a benefit, especially if you didn't have time because you got called at the last minute, hey, show up to school to make your lunch. So I like that one because I think it's not only, it's not even about the dollar amount, it's about the appreciation.
Right.
And for a thankless job, that's a little something that can be done. I also really like number 6, the reimbursement after whatever the designated amount, because that helps all. And the cafeteria days, I like that for all schools, not just priority schools. Those would be my favorites, are 3, 5, and 6. I also would like us to look at the one that's not listed on here, which would be an adjustment to the hourly rate, even if we didn't change the upper ones, if we looked at raising the high school and the AA ones, if that's possible.
We can get you a cost on it.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
So as far as if we make these recommendations and then what we, if it happens, so we talked about the possibility that now everybody jumps ship and we get great fill rates at our priority schools and everybody starts jumping. If that happens, then we know whatever we did worked, and then we can spread it on to everybody else. But I think when you go into SubFinder and there's the announcements or whatever, there's always the things that are in bright red or blue that you guys put in there. They're like, hey, you can make $50 an hour. I can't remember, there's some tech program that you got to do, or hey, we have new sites working at the DJJ sites, and there's anything that was a higher pay, or we're looking that draws the eye. If we can say, hey, you can contact us if you want to work at this, and this school, you're going to get $20 extra. It needs to be there on the front page in red letters of the SubFinder.
So you reminded me of something with what you just said. We did not include our jail, our detention center, our ALCs. They all have problems as well. We included just our regular schools, but it is something, they would need to be added in on any kind of incentive, Title I or not. I think we would have to talk about that because they proportionately look different because they have fewer teachers, so they're going to skew the numbers, but they always have to be in the back of our minds with substitutes too. So I thought I'd throw that out to you guys. Didn't include them, but they're on my mind.
Been on my mind the whole time.
Okay, somebody take care of you.
I mean, how do we feel as a board about adding them to the list?
Yep.
I mean, because it's such a
The
small
one,
number.
the list of Title I,
Yeah.
I think that
Of
should definitely
priority
go with
schools.
the priority
Right.
schools.
Yeah.
The other thing, I'm sorry, Ms. Deskovich, do you wanna, I just had one quick
Go
comment.
ahead.
I think you and your team have done a great job of representing the opportunities that Brevard County brings for recruitment and retention of our instructional personnel and some of our other roles. And I know we have done a little bit of massaging of the area of our substitute recruitment area, but as you have been doing with the others, I feel like there's great opportunity for additional communication and celebration and really making it look enticing to come and be a substitute in the Brevard County schools. And you can probably steal some of the stuff that we've utilized for the other recruitment and retention pieces, but I feel like if we could just make that a little more appealing, and then perhaps government and community relations can assist with some community outreach communication as well.
I really think that our parents are an under-tapped resources because so many of them are volunteering, and if you're gonna be here for 7 hours a day, might as well get
Yeah.
paid for it, you
You're
know,
right.
and you get to know your teachers, you get to know your school, you get the inside scoop on what's going on. I mean, it's a fantastic employee pool for subs.
But get
So-
them to also work, because I have too many inside my Sierra Town schools. We need them to go down to my Ocala schools.
I had an interesting conversation related to that with Dr. Sullivan some months ago. Maybe a month ago. Time gets away from me. But related to having people don't think about what they could do, even teaching wise, and having meetings to explain to people the ease at which they can get certificates, or they can get temporary certificates, or they can work in our schools, have hours similar to their children, be in schools potentially with their kids. And I brought that back to Mr. Alba. I'm not capturing exactly what you said, but I'm close. But it's a good idea. We don't do that kind of outreach. We don't spend a lot of time talking to people about what they could do to be a teacher. We're thinking we have to go always to those universities and get those kids, the young people, out of the colleges of education. Well, they're not there. They're just not there. So we've got to up that game. And I think substitutes is another piece of it, because somebody may not want to be a full-time teacher, but subbing may fit in with their lifestyle. They just have never considered it because we've never asked them about it.
It's a good point.
Or
For
maybe
what
they
she-
come in and sub and decide they really, really love it, and they can take one of those alt-cert paths to become a
And
teacher in
become a
their
teacher.
district.
Possible.
So I was looking at the cost per lunch, and I guess we were using the $3.10 per. Is that what the cost of the district is?
That's what number Kevin gave me, and I asked him specifically for.
That's what we
If you go
costs
eat
us
at
to
your
give
kids'-
them a thing is $3.10.
I know, it depends what we charge.
We
They have
charge
to
$3.10.
They have
but-
to charge an adult rate.
Okay, but
So-
what is it costing us? Because that's what the number we're looking at.
Can't
not
answer
what
that,
we're
but I know
costing.
they
I don't
have
know.
federal
I don't know, keep in mind that
guidelines.
food service is its own separate.
They have federal guidelines.
Don't say us, costing Kevin.
I'm sorry, but what I'm saying is when we were looking at the 114,000, that looks at $3.10 roughly. I was doing the numbers per, and I don't think that it costs us $3.10 to put that meal in front of that.
It's
So
what,
when we're-
it's what we charge.
Right, but it's not what it costs us to put it in front of them, meaning that if we are gonna be allocating money towards this, it's actually gonna be lower than what you think, because not only are they not all gonna take it, but then it's also costs less. Does that make sense? Am I right?
You're right.
Ms.
I
Pine?
think you're like logically that makes sense, but this is an illogical enterprise governed by the federal government. So I understand what you're saying logically. Just from our experience, it does not work that way, and we have to charge an adult at an adult rate. You're using some common sense, which I think does not apply in this
And because he
circumstance.
has his own bookkeeping, we may have to transfer that money that he
Yeah.
is
And then-
providing.
and
It's
I
just some
understand. I get it, Kevin.
illogical rules with
This
the
wasn't
federal
out of
government.
funds. Yes.
One of the things, and then the last thing,
Right,
I'm
so we have to
sorry,
give him
this has
back
just been
his money.
a big thing
It's a
for us for a
general
long
fund,
time.
yeah.
One of the things that we have is that the substitutes are targets for the kids when they come in, right? It's substitute day, let's hammer the sub, right? And we know that I did it as a kid, you guys may have been in a class that might have done it. I may have been the one that led the cause, but here's the deal, is that if we come out with some kind of a policy that protects them, might give it more of a defense towards what they're afraid of inside those discipline rooms, it might make them feel more inept to go into those schools. Does that make sense to
School
you?
by schools and school leadership by leadership, because I, had a friend who subbed down at Heritage, and I was like, man, how is that? She said, oh, it's wonderful. She said, every day I sub there, one of the administrators walks by and comes in my room, hey, how's your day? How's it going? And I have been to schools where I didn't see the administrator the whole entire day. They didn't even know I was there. They never checked on me, and I was in some nightmare classes. So that's their job.
No, it could be our job to
Dude.
put together a policy that gives protections to substitutes inside the classroom. So if there's a way that we can bolster protection for substitutes inside the classroom, it would give them the opportunities past what an administrator walking by would be. And if we gave that out there as a group of individuals that are substitutes that are looking to come into the schools, and they say, hey, I've got extra protections, I'm getting extra, it's just an added incentive. So it would be something that I would like to look into.
So we have policies around employees. It doesn't specifically mention substitutes, but they are our employees when they're in our schools. So that's something we can look at the existing policy on. I've got it down.
Just to see if there's an opportunity to give them a little bit more protection.
Thank you, Dr. Buddy. And so quickly, I'll just go through mine real quick so we can wrap up this and get on to our government community relations who are patiently waiting over there. I agree with the others that, actually I think it was Katie, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 2, 5, and 6 were my number ones. My actual number one was let's focus on incentivizing teachers to stay, but I know that's probably a little bit of a longer term, might have to be a bargain type thing. But that, if I had to champion anything, that's what we'd rather have our actual classroom teachers in more often. The $1 pay per hour, as a former substitute myself, it just does not look interesting to me. But $20 a day looks really interesting to me. So I think Katie and I, we have that same mindset, like, ooh, $20 a day.
Not 25.
Yeah, to 20 or 25, I think it interests me the same level. So for us, that it's a savings at 20. So why, the 5 more isn't, I'm not like, oh, now it's 25. It's like $20 more a day. It just sounds fabulous when you're bringing home 90 a day and all of a sudden now it's over 100. It's a big deal. The reoccurring supplement, I think that's a great way to show appreciation for our long-term subs. We don't have that many, like you said, but we have some that are completely dedicated at that particular school, and it's just a nice way to say thank you for coming back again and again and again. The high holidays to start off with for an $80,000 price tag, I'm not super gung-ho about that one off with the get-go. The cafeteria thing, you said start in 2020. Can we start that now? I mean, with a $12,000 potential price tag, that is just not a whole lot of money, and that's assuming everyone in every one of our Title I schools eats every day. Do we really have to wait till January for that?
Take a look at it.
I think, and another, I think maybe it was Katie that said it, it's just good for morale. It's just good to say, hey, it's something good and cheerful to share and promote and offer.
Get a salad.
Yeah, why wait? That seems like an easy one. But I do think we should try to negotiate with Kevin. He's a money-making machine over there.
So these were general fund
Yeah.
Operating kinds of
Yeah.
suggestions. They weren't Kevin's.
Okay.
Fund
yeah,
suggestions.
negotiate
Have to
with
be
Kevin.
reimbursed.
See what he's willing to donate to us for,
So I'm looking at Mr. Novelli with the eyes in the back of my head, and he's saying,
looks responsive.
We can definitely look into it, but I put these together not as a cost to
Send in the
Kevin,
hard
just so
seller.
you know.
Send in Mr. Susan or
We can always
somebody.
take out, if he's not agreeing to it, then we can always take out more of an allocation to pay off the money that we took out for the after-school programs and the armored car that we have. If we got rid of the armored car, we could save the money to pay for the
I think
cells.
we need to move forward with the reimbursement, fingerprintings, whatever set date.
So I
you
do
choose
not
with that.
have a cost. I really need a cost on that because for
Yeah,
me
I'm not
right now,
move
it's-
forward with looking into it, picking a
yes,
date, not
it's a
move forward
great
like that.
idea. I appreciate that suggestion. I just want to put a dollar figure to what that
Of
looks
course.
like.
It's-
Because I'll tell you, it actually, sometimes you get what you ask for, and that is you pay for those things and all of a sudden you have a much greater number, it costs you a whole lot more money. I just want to know what our baseline is, and I have no idea. Michelle and Elise worked on that today and could not get to the data in time for this meeting. There's just,
Do you know how
Couldn't
many
get it.
new subs we've hired since, I don't know, July? Is that what you don't have?
yeah, that's what I
Okay.
don't have. Because I tasked them, when I got this yesterday late, first thing this morning, I was in front of Elise saying, okay, I need these numbers like in 5 minutes. So she tried really hard, but they're just not easy to pull. We
Gotcha.
can get them, it's just gonna take a while.
I
So-
think let's say, before we wrap, my only other concern with subs is just how fast we can get them started, you know?
This thing, like how fast we can make all this
So
happen?
Dr.
No,
Betty-
how fast
Like,
from the time they
please,
say, hey, I
talking
wanna
my
be a,
music there.
how
It's
fast
an
can we be a
onboarding.
sub
It's
to
onboarding.
how fast we
Oh.
can get them in the computer
That is
because
another, you're right.
it takes a while. I mean, and if you have to go through the 24-hour, I didn't have to do that because I have an education degree, but if you do have to do the 24, it's up to them how fast are they going through that part. But I mean, I had Beacon is a pain in the tail.
Oh, we understand.
Yeah, so, but just that process, if there's anything we can do to streamline, I know you're already doing that because the great work you've already been doing in HR, so as fast as we can do that. I guess.
I'm like, oh my gosh, go ahead, Ms. McDougal. I'm really trying government
no, this
community
is just one-
relations, but I
just one
can't.
thing.
I've lost control over here.
You know, Mr. Susan was talking about just focusing on the north end. I think we would really need to focus on our Title I schools, a couple in each area, so we spread it out to get a sense of what would happen across our district. That would just be my recommendation. So just, not that you're not important, but I just think, I also have schools and so does the south. Not as much as the north and central, but I think we should spread it out across the whole district.
And the other thing we can look at, depending what you would want to do, is the schools that have been on the list multiple years in a row.
That makes
We do
sense.
have that history, we do know who those schools are, they do cross all 3 areas.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've had a good.
So if I can just remind the board of where we are, we will work on putting together an update. Suggest we're together for an offsite December 20th and provide the board an update. We'll hope to have some financials. My thought on lunches is to talk to our schools who would be taking advantage of that and see if they can cover that cost within their own budget, because we have schools doing that now within their budget. Because I want to remind the board that you charged me with finding ways to save money for compensation, and we're coming off a year where we have tapped extensive resources to provide
This is compensation.
the most competitive salary offer in Central Florida. So we want to do these things, but it has to be within the, all of the other priorities that we're given. So just gotta remind what
And we
we're-
need to remind everybody else, the subs haven't seen a raise in like 12 years.
May I make a recommendation that the idea of surveying would probably be the first step, if that's
Surveying the substitutes.
As long as it doesn't slow down the process.
Of course it's gonna slow
It's
down.
gonna slow it down because we have to survey them, and
Yeah,
I've gotta
later
work
on
with
stuff.
Elise and Michelle to see what that access is, but if the access is easy, potentially, and we can put something on SmartFind that says click here, and get some kind of survey set up that I can give you some actionable data, because what we believe substitutes may want, only 2 of the things on there came from substitutes, lunch and the payment of all of the fees on the first part.
I'm pretty sure they want $20 more a day.
Yeah.
And some of this isn't
Big
about
rider, especially
them
the ladies.
necessarily as it is our need to fill these roles in
Okay.
Title I schools. I mean,
Which
it's.
brings up an interesting point though, and I agree that we need to survey our subs, but we're gonna be surveying the people who are already substituting for us, not the multitude of people in the community who we want to come and substitute for us that are not.
I would use it as an opportunity to improve, and we just move forward full steam on the other stuff. So we don't slow down.
Does anybody have anything else for Dr. Betty?
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks, you're welcome. Thank you.
No, guys,
Thank you
discussion.
to Michelle and Lise, I appreciate you.
Yes,
It's mine, I bought it.
Michelle.
I'm
allowing
allowing
her
her
to
to
have it back.
Get in between those two.
Hey, guys, take 2 minutes if you need it.
So that leaves-
Meanwhile, Matt Reed, Assistant Superintendent of Government and Community Relations, and Deborah Foley, Supervisor of Marketing and Outreach, will give us an update on advertising and get themselves ready to go.
Can you guys stand?
Oh,
We
yeah,
got
absolutely.
stand up and swirl around.
I need my present vitamin water.
So we're gonna meet on that. Do you have any time tomorrow potentially?
No, we're outside all day, so.
Okay.
Well, not all day, but I was somebody that morning.
You're allowed to do that?
Get stuff done in the morning.
Just kidding.
Mom plan.
Oh, I already, so I'll have to.
It was like a. But that's the fear that I have.
I just know that I. I can for myself. No, I bought it intuitively, just as Joe has to bring it. Okay. But now I know that's bad. Well, let's see. They are number one.
Yeah. Poker face.
So,
You heard that song on the phone?
yeah, we'd love to have you. Great.
Is that one? I like that song.
Well, but then another one came to mind and I had no clue what the song
I don't know what it was, but they loved it.
was.
Right. No, it wasn't the one that they had tied in.
I'll have to pay attention next time.
I'll check with Lee, she would know. She's
Are we
been here
still-
since-
Can I get the lady who told me to just
Streaming?
email us, so you know what
Was it a, was it
It
a
was a
substitute?
We are, I just want to make sure.
Across the street.
I didn't
So-
recess
so-
this.
Yeah, I would like to know. I think I might have an order about the other thing.
Hey guys, we're not recessed, we're still streaming, so let's move right back into it if you can, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Betty.
Thank you, guys.
It's what you were supposed to be doing.
No, I had to. Go ahead.
Focus.
Sorry, second right here.
We're not fighting each other. We love you, but not that much.
I get it.
It's not a reflection of the love.
Before we start, I'll share that I was substituted for every day of my oldest son's 4 years in high school at his school.
Wow, every
Every
day?
day?
Every day, that poor child.
That's wonderful.
And then did he say, Mom, go home?
No, the second child said he was coming behind, 4 years behind, and he said, that's not gonna happen. First one loved it.
Your
Yeah,
mom
it's
is
so
so
cool.
follow back with
I do know.
Did a lot of long-term stuff, the whole semester, so much easier.
You're a good mom.
Thank you for that email, Pam.
That's when they see you every day. They
Well,
don't
it's a
have to-
little-
I know, I knew, but nobody was cooperating, okay?
I'm trying to find the song I was telling you about.
Well, all right, why don't we get started? Because here's Ms. McDougal and Mr. Susan will be back, so whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, I think you already, for the record, identified me as Matt Reed, Assistant Superintendent for Government and Community Relations, and this is Deborah Foley, BPS's Marketing and Outreach Coordinator. Our job here today is to give you a progress report on BPS's advertising program and how it has grown over the years since its inception. Also to identify some next steps for growing that advertising revenue as we all turn over every stone, looking for more revenue to fund district priorities.
Substitutes.
Right out of their mouth.
In preparation for today, we took the rare step for us of hiring an independent outside school advertising expert and consultant who analyzed our finances, examined our products and publications, surveyed local advertisers, both current and prospective, compared our program to best practices in other school districts around Florida, and made recommendations, big and small, for how we can improve, some of which we'll prioritize and share with you today. I'm going to turn it over to Deb.
Okay, the first thing I wanted to do was to define what is advertising, because you'll see, you have a sponsorship and things like that. So advertising is a paid, tangible asset. It is something that a company recognizes as something that is real. It's not just something from the heart. We, at Brevard Public Schools, boast 150 advertising clients on our books. That's from 2013 when we started to present. And we have sold just over $1.6 million in advertising. That is hard dollars. And I wanted to do just a little tangent and talk about Partners in Education very quickly, just for a minute. You have a PIE report card, Partners in Education, that we fondly call PIE. I just wanted to make sure everybody is on board with the difference between advertising and PIE. So if you look on the report card, there's some wheels, and one of them is a pie chart.
The book? Ms.
Yes,
Vesicich doesn't have.
she
She doesn't have a book.
This is this.
Yeah, I got one. Here, you can just leave mine.
They have a book too, I don't
We have a
know.
book.
You got a
Should
book?
everybody-
I'll find your book. Here's a book.
Everybody has one.
Oh, my
I didn't
stuff.
steal- I didn't
you
steal
stole
anything.
it.
Okay.
You stole mine because that would be yours at the end of the
I
table.
was getting in trouble. I didn't do anything.
Okay. I'll figure that out after you're done. So if you look at the four pieces of the pie, our business partners, the traditional business partners that I've been engaging with since I took this job, are there in a big segment. And then Sarah Allman works with our faith-based partners and our nonprofit organizations. But then the red part of the pie is the schools, and that is the pie coordinators at the schools. That is really the critical piece of this, because there's about 100 of them. And I can spend all the time in the world going out like this morning and meeting a bunch of new people to be partners. If nothing ever happens, then nothing ever happens. And so we need that school pie coordinator, and they're a really critical piece to it. So that is more the cash and in-kind support that comes from these pie coordinators, or that's what they get. So we have about 500 plus partners, and we brought in over $6 million of cash and in-kind support in Partners in Education. So it's not as tangible. I just want you to know. Today I know we're talking about advertising, but I just wanted you to know how important that piece of the support that comes from there. And on the back of that is we get them together once a month, so we have a whole year's calendar of things for the pie coordinators to do to come out and engage with our business partners. So that's on the back.
And I just want to pause for a minute and to show you kind of how we see it, and, how intertwined those two programs that Deborah just talked about are, how interdependent they are, and how much return on investment they are. As we will explain a little bit later, because we have the advertising program and because Deborah is successful, it pays for itself. And this is what it pays for. We have one salesperson for Brevard Public Schools. That is Deborah Foley, and Tricia Garisi, who is our admin for government community relations, customer care, and printing services, is also the bookkeeper for the advertising program, which is a pretty significant job. And of course, if we didn't have the advertising program that paid for a Deborah Foley, we wouldn't have the person who is so expert and such a state leader in coordinating those Partners in Education people, which is over 100 people that we train, motivate, track, and work through all throughout the year.
They're really key.
Just a brief history. This program has been around since 2013 when the board passed a policy to do that. Within a couple of months, we had hired an advertising coordinator, that would be Deborah, and within a month, we had sold our first ad. Key point here. You must have something in which to run the advertisement. We actually had to launch a newspaper called EdConnect in which to put our first advertisements, which were from Health First. We have since evolved and we've gone to much more digital type publishing for our frequent things, but we do still do some printing, and Deborah will give you a sense here now what all we're making our money from.
So over here I have a display, which I'll leave up and come back and clean up tomorrow, but we have mostly publications over here because that's easy to show you. But some really creative things that we've done is those of you who know the car visor loop when you come pick up my kid is Sean Foley, don't give me the wrong kid. We get about $25,000 for the back of this. So that was a super creative thing. Just things like that. We really tried to think the big cash cow over here is the planners. You know, the planners carry a lot of advertising, and it's really nice because I sell them in January, February, so we get that infusion of cash right at the end of the school year, where most everything else is sold in the summer, so we have it at the beginning. There's other things that we've come up with that we'll talk about. In your books, which hopefully Tina will find yours, but in your books.
Oh, I've got it. Matt
Okay.
stole it.
Katie actually stole it. It was right here. And I was just close to the vicinity.
In your books,
so I
you
just-
have
I
the
took
rate
advantage
cards.
of it.
You have the rate card, so if you're saying, hey, what does it cost to get in, you know, the parent resource guide or one of the newsletters, you all have the rate cards. And they're actually up here in these blue site frames if anybody else cares about what the rate cards are. So now we will go to see what are we talking about here in dollars. So generally we sell about $250,000 a year in advertising. Our biggest product is newsletters. One of the things is because we have so many of them, so they all lump together. And you can see the planners come on really strong, as I said. The asterisk means that we don't have any sales for that yet for this year. Other is big because that's where all the sports stuff comes. That several years ago we sold a lot of things in sports. We sold the ticket backs. We sold when Bright House Sports was still around. They paid us a lot of money to do things to promote them. All of those funky one-offs over there, the tags and the parking lot things.
Can I ask a quick question about the naming rights? Is that a yearly thing that is
That's
it by the
the
year?
Florida Tech Stadium at Palm Bay High School.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's
These are
So
5
that's
years.
what 20 cents.
yeah. Then he didn't put that on there again. Yeah, this is 20.
This is cumulative over
Yeah,
since
this is
2013.
cumulative.
Okay.
2013 till a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay, so just so you can see who our big clients are, Health First is our biggest client. They pretty much buy anything I present to them. It's a really sweet deal. They like a lot of things, and we get a lot of direction from them as to what kinds of things they'd like to see. You see that Florida Tech in there from that's mostly those the naming rights.
And how much per year is the naming rights for the stadium?
20,000.
Okay, it's in a 5-year.
It's a
Yeah, that's
5-year
what I was
contract, but
looking
we've
at, yeah.
extended it now 2 times, and now we're on to we've got
What is the other $107,000 coming from?
$7,450. They're an advertiser in newsletters and banners
Okay,
and different things
got
like
it.
that.
Perfect.
One back. I just was going to point out that Brilliant Smiles Orthodontics, for example, no longer advertises in any other vehicles in the community. So we are really giving them a good ROI. Now, where does that money go? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so one of the cool things here is if you look at coming from an advertising background, when you have 150 clients being managed by one account executive, that's kind of an interesting thing. But look at all these that are little guys. There's 100 of them. That's really great because that's the pie feeding advertising, but it gives you a great pipeline. Okay, so you can help move these guys up, especially, and these that are right in here. Let's just keep
Yeah.
them happy.
I would just point out, by way of local economy, a number of our major companies here have given up on the smaller advertisers and are focusing on the whale kind of accounts, while we have really done such a great job of giving them both targeted ways to advertise to people that they want to reach, and Deborah's done a fantastic job of, again, mining that or cultivating the people from the Partners in Education program.
You know, where does the money go?
All right, so Deborah sells and brings in the money, and I get to spend it. So I want to give you a sense of where the money goes, the advertising revenue. Again, this is not the money that goes to schools and Partners of Education program. This is the cash that comes from selling advertising contracts. Right off the top, $100,000 goes back by policy to the general fund for BPS. The way this was explained to me is that when we launched this program, we wanted to make sure that there was no net cost to the district, so this more than covers the cost of our marketing and outreach supervisor, as well as some of the time and expenses that the advertising program has. $75,000 is the share of the ads and some of the banners and things that you know, if we sell advertising that appears at schools, the schools get a share of that advertising revenue. $25,000 is the public relations fund, which statutorily is the only real source that we're allowed to create that pays for all the food that people use for professional development, banquets, and things like that. I call it food fund. And then $50,000 is essentially the money that government and community relations keeps for our expenses. And I want to show you where those go now because it's a good question. About almost 80% of it is our cost of doing business. 61% is the software platforms and subscriptions that we need to run BPS TV, to run our email newsletters, social media archiving, the customer care software that tracks cases, and so forth. Printing services, we are a customer of printing services. In addition to paper and other things that we have paid for, you know, with printing services, we also have invested in some equipment that allows us to produce more banners in large format. We've also, we now pay also for the temporary summertime labor that is necessary to produce so many of those planners by the time August comes around. And then one of the ways that we've made our budget cuts over the past couple of years is that this is the only source of money that we have for our own department's professional development.
So I wanted to give you a little bit from the consultant's report, just so you can see a little bit. He did 2 different surveys. One was of our current advertisers, and this was to see who is it people want to reach when they select us to advertise with, and our community, which is really the encompassing parents, students, teachers, and our community partners. So that's who we set out to reach, and our advertisers are saying that's who they wanted to reach as well. So
Okay, is your chart off, or is that the 65?
It doesn't make
little,
sense.
Or is the number down?
Oh,
Plus
I think
and that doesn't equal
Yeah, I
100 even
think
without that.
that's okay.
Okay, well, they can
Yeah,
do the one.
because they could have selected more than one. Yeah, probably it looks like, I don't know what that's supposed to be. I'll have to look at that.
So could an advertiser select more than one?
Right, because we have different products. You know, some people might really just want parents. Some people, we have lots that just
Still,
want
33
staff.
is way higher than 65 something.
so that's how many, okay, yeah. Yep.
And then, what is the reason that you selected this? I thought was really interesting because they want to reach new customers, so that's something in their marketing plan. But they support the schools and that community outreach piece. So we're satisfying a piece of corporate citizenship as well. There's definitely a hard sell in this. That was nice. And then we just wanted to say that our advertisers are happy with us. Yay! That's good. So then he surveyed potential advertisers, and this was interesting because it basically reflects what we showed in the earlier chart, that potential advertisers want to reach the community that we have, families, employees, and partners, in order to find new customers, and Headlines, which is our weekly community newsletter, was the most desired vehicle. So I took that to mean like maybe I need to lower the price on Headlines and just put a whole lot of ads in Okay, so then one of the other questions Dr. Mullins asked me to do was to evaluate what other counties are doing.
That's what I wanted to know.
So yes, a couple of you all asked me that as well. We're doing really well. We're doing really well. If you look at Orange County, who's 3 times the size of us in schools, and you pull out $100,000 of that, that would bring you to $250. They have an outside agency who brings in about $100,000. So their full-time advertising salesperson is doing about $250, which is about what we're doing as well.
They have just one full-time person also?
Who does not run a partners
Yes,
in
she doesn't
education
run
program.
Pi, she just
sells
sells
all the
advertising.
To clarify, Deb sells for 3 months during the summer. Rings a bell, ding, 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 every time she makes a sale, funds us for the year, and then she turns her attention to running the Partners in Education program. So it raises the question of, if you had more people selling more often somehow, would that be a potential increase in?
Just to clarify, Deb, the PI, for example, I think of Georgiana United Methodist Church, who is a super partner with Cambridge Elementary School, Tropical Elementary, and I think a third school. And
Okay.
I know that they have like written a $9,000 check to Tropical Elementary School. That's not necessarily captured in this. That's a
This is
direct.
tangible real estate.
This is just advertising.
Okay, that 9,000 is gonna be in that Pi number.
Correct, okay.
Yes, this is tangible real estate. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else we can say about this, but we're doing very well for the essentially part-time person doing it.
So as I just kind of hinted at, one of the findings was that we are kind of, I don't think flatlining is a very nice word to use. It sounds like we're dying, but it really,
Flatline,
we were
plateau.
plateauing in terms of how much
Wow.
money we are bringing in from the same sort of market with the same amount of time and person available. But that was an interesting finding. But another one is, and I think this is important to stress, because there's no shortage of ideas on how and where you could advertise, where you can start. This is an incredibly competitive field. We work in a market that has 10 or 12 major radio stations, 3 to 4 major television stations. Florida Today still exists, as do a number of websites, smaller publications, and they are after it. You know, we are a government agency that tries not to compete directly head-to-head with private industry, but we do have to compete. Prices are based on the competitive market. We are glad that we have a slightly different model where we have the Partners in Education and other people that support us, and we can go to internal customers with whom we do development and also ask them if they'd like to be advertising clients.
So some of the things that we thought that we could do based on the consultant's recommendations that we could do it with no extra money was to maximize our existing platforms. And you know, when I look at some of the planners, for example, who it's really a workhorse product, and we probably could look at the pricing of the planner. And we've added the high school planners on, and I've never really raised the prices. So some things like that, we could look at some pricing. Now that we can manage the website ourselves a little bit better, we would like to try to standardize the size on the website of the ads to fit to the national standard. So when a Walgreens or a national client wants to put an ad on our website, we can't say, I'm sorry, this is the only size you can have, which I had to say for many years. So we would love to move forward on that. And then I have been working with a multi-district coalition, mostly through Central Florida counties, but we have secured our first client to, they're gonna actually run in our employee newsletter. And we will continue to work that so that somebody else is doing a little bit of work and we're all gonna get the ad. So that are things that are easy to do, and now.
So this is the one that's a little more, this is the newer one. And this is where we think there's potential to grow and expand and get close to what Orange County is doing, for example. If you noticed, one of the things that they do, one of the things that the consultant recommended was hiring an outside agency or hiring somebody internally, but we think an outside agency is the way to go that specializes primarily in athletic sponsorships, athletic facilities. We think that the best way to go would be to, if we go this route, go ahead and have any revenue that comes in from that program just be sequestered in a fund that could be determined to be spent on things that we can't afford, or to make some sort of equity spend on athletics. It's not really up to us to decide on that, but we would be happy to administer the program like that.
And just so you know, not to interrupt you, sorry, but all of that you saw in other that had to do with sports, that's how it was. When we sold the back of the tickets, the money went to what was then Cape Coast Conference, so.
And one of the things we would probably do is get a request for proposal type of thing. You come to us with your pitch, whether you're iHeartMedia Outdoors or you're one of the consultants that we have heard from. Tell us what you can do for us. You know, if your idea is you're going to do billboards and wrap vehicles, great. If you think you can do things at stadiums, fantastic. We want to know how much we can earn, how much can we put back into our schools without much overhead with the maximum amount of flexibility in case it isn't something that we can decide is worth it in the long run. We think it could be, though. We think, given what we've seen, that it's in the $100,000 to $200,000, depending on how things go. It's not millions.
Gross.
If that's gross, we would need to pay a commission out of that as well.
Can I ask, like, so what would the target be? Give me an example of a company that might come in to do something like this then.
A drugstore company, Honda of Central Florida. What we think the focus should be is on kind of larger regional companies and clients for two reasons. One, that's where the real money is. We didn't have a lot of the big clients. We'd like to get more of those that spend more. But in addition, we don't want to cannibalize what boosters are doing at their schools.
Right.
They are really focusing on those local companies selling their banners, and they have to do that to fund their programs. We don't want to bigfoot them out of the way. We want to let them go ahead and do that, and let's have our consultant or agency focus on something that's bigger and more.
The reason I was asking is that say Wusthof, or what is it called now?
Rockledge
Regional.
Yeah,
Rockledge
Stewart
Regional wants to say take half the Palm Bay schools and put their emblem right at the 50-yard line, and then Health First wants to do the Central and Parish wants to do the North. But then all of a sudden one of them back out. The idea is that even though it's regionally might be in one or the other, that's all going to go to a fund that'll then be distributed among the schools. Is that kind of what I was saying?
What we talked about is there's going to be some schools that advertisers will pay more to be in than other schools, but that school should not disproportionately benefit just because of where their school is or that sort of thing. So it would come to a district fund, there'd be an oversight of it, and then it would be equitably distributed to athletic programs or that type of thing. So
How are you, like, if you're selling, how are you not double doing what the track coach is selling at?
Because the track coach can't reach the large.
Yeah.
No, the track coach
Corporation.
has sold the back of the billboard at Satellite High School. Meanwhile, our advertising agency has sold the back of the billboard at
Oh,
Satellite
I see what
High
you're saying.
School. How, like,
You're
that's
talking about the same spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we stay away from what the boosters are doing. They're not doing naming rights. They're not doing, scoreboards and bigger things like that.
the banners that line the fence line, that's a school effort. I was just at Merritt Island High School. I mean, it is lined with banners.
So that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about hiring an ad agency to do this? Are there ad agencies that focus on government
Yeah, they're partners.
type sales?
Yeah, there are agencies that focus on this kind of thing. They work in other counties. There's a small number of them, but they're pretty good. And I think that we are interested in having, like I said, having them come to pitch to us. And
Do they work on commission only?
So that's the next
They
slide.
can.
There's three ways
So we won't.
that they work. Retainer plus commission only, and then, like a special project, like you just want them to go out and sell X. So that would be something Dawn left us, but, in the RFP process, we could look at that.
So getting back real quick to the naming rights, all that stuff, it would just be like we already named Dick Blake Stadium. We couldn't let Walmart come in and a naming right would be that they want that specific school, right?
Could be the
So-
Walmart Dick Blake
and
Stadium.
I think, what's that?
Could be the Walmart Dick Blake Stadium.
Might have to
But
be
what
Dick Blake
I'm
Walmart.
saying is that that's all ebb
You might
and
be
flow.
like,
That's
Walmart,
all,
Walmart.
it's not like we're gonna say, take all this, and so I think this is awesome. But I wanted to address that just real quick.
One of the things I
They-
have.
those-
There's gonna be some issues. I
Yeah,
think,
but it's okay.
The one advantage going with an outside agency like that is that they very often already have large clients that they will bring to you.
Yeah.
As opposed to us saying, well, we've got this, then go beat the bush to find somebody to sell it.
What are we waiting for?
Cause they're already working with Palm Beach and Marion County, they can say, hey, we can give you Brevard County too, right?
Potentially, yeah.
It's
So-
a way to fund our athletic fields.
No, it's
Well, don't get too crazy,
not gonna be that
$100,000.
much.
That's not gonna be that way.
I was gonna say,
But
Palm
it-
Beach
on
and
the
Marion
record.
are bringing in 50 something.
But-
But it's,
Someone to sell more.
But it's more, right, so we can get there. Can I ask you this?
But I can
So-
always get,
Have you seen what's up to
HVAC
do?
That's some kick
Um,
it goes.
So here's one of the things. So in my world, we have captured agents and we have open agencies, right? So you have a client that will have 35 agents that are selling the same product, right? So what I'm hearing you say is that you want to go give one company the ability to sell. But what if we listed out, these are the things that we would like you to sell, and if any other outside agency can go sell them quicker because they're you see what I mean? Like, what is the models?
A great example would be that we had Subway sandwich franchises all over the place.
Right.
Right? You could sell the back of tickets, as we have done in the past. I'm not sure are we still doing that? I don't think we're still doing that, but you can sell the back of tickets as coupons. And that's a very common thing, we just haven't done it.
No, what I mean.
I've done it, we're just not doing it right now.
What I mean is that you have advertising agency A, B, and C, right? What I'm hearing you say is your model is we go request for proposal and go with advertising agency A to sell all of these issues. But what I've seen in the past with sales, which I want to hear your opinion, is that you go with, these are our list of things that we want to sell, and A, B, and C, you can go to sell. Does that make sense to create the competition to go after it? Or is there not enough competition in the work,
Can you go back to that slide that just has Tricia and I on it?
Somebody would have to manage
Right. I mean,
ABCD.
Yeah, I hear
Right.
what you're saying, and it sounds great, and in the agency world, there's all kinds of things with brokers, and you do all that kind of thing. This is really,
okay.
I
What I
know.
was saying is if you said, here's all the stadiums, here's all the backboards, here's all this, they contact you with a seller, what's the difference between that and a person who, all of them, I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing it? What's the difference
No.
between multiple agencies selling one thing or one agency
just
selling
kind
one
of
thing?
managing it.
Okay, managing multiple agencies?
It's just, I think that, I mean, you could, conceptually that would work, but I think that, what you're essentially saying is putting all of your inventory up for auction, right?
Yeah.
The reality is it takes a lot of marketing and
Okay.
footwork and calls and selling.
So you're saying
to
go out for
actually get that
athletics,
done.
see how
For
this
us,
And,
it'd be
and
better
if
to
they
hire.
sold something on our website, if they sold something on our website or something that wasn't athletics, that would be great. Pizza Hut comes in and says, oh, you have that empty space, we'd love to take that. That would be great, doesn't necessarily have to be just that, but we just thought that, from the consultant's report, that is a glaring thing that we aren't doing very much of.
What if, here's a backdrop, let's do this.
I know we're out of time.
What if we grab a company and we say, we're gonna sell all these athletics, this is the thing, right? We go out for a request for proposal. All of a sudden, an outside agency comes in and says, hey guys, I've got a client that'll buy all of your back of your scoreboards. Would we allow them to sell it? Perfect, okay. That's what I'm saying. I know, but just non-restrictive.
so the consultant didn't say we need to put ads on the side of our work trucks or on the roofs of our
There
schools
you
or
go.
anything like
Because
that.
that was written on my whiteboard already. He came and took a picture of all the ideas I already had.
I wouldn't suggest that it isn't possible. We cannot advertise on buses by by Florida State statute. But we can on our yellow plate vehicles. The question is who out there would want to come to the table and do that? So,
What has Scott got for advertising on a bus? Anybody know?
Yeah, I bet Morgan and Morgan would be willing.
No, I'm not.
Robin Fisher's got a big old picture on
Oh,
one
I
of the
have the
Scott
rate
buses.
card. Are you talking about the Scat buses?
Yeah.
I thought you said Scott. No, I have the rate card back at my desk.
Do you, roughly, what does somebody pay to advertise on a bus?
It's a good amount of money, and they have to pay for wrapping the bus as well.
And
So
see,
what about one
we
of our
have,
big white
It's gonna have to pay for paint.
But our,
Exactly.
yeah, our white vans that travel.
And there are
Yeah.
opportunities to
Or
advertise.
courier vans.
Morgan and
Just not in
Morgan,
certain
for the
places.
people.
you can advertise
Can I ask
inside
another
the
question that,
Yeah.
about PI for
You
a
can
minute?
advertise inside,
So,
you just can't
do you
advertise.
have PI coordinators at every school?
Yes,
We don't want to sell.
And are they
We
compensated?
would be
in
exploiting
that?
it.
They are. We've
That's
discussed this for
nice.
several years. They are not at this moment.
They volunteered
So-
or voluntold?
So, Dr. Seti, I know we're looking at stipends for some of our people. I think this group, the Pi people, should be.
I have that on the list, and
Thank
I don't
you so
remember
much.
who gave it to me.
Probably Rick Morton has that.
No, it was not Rick. I don't remember. Somebody gave it to me. I've got it on the list.
When-
Thank you.
So we're gonna come up with a contract that says something like, you either get paid commission, commission only, other plans and all that stuff. And when we're writing that policy, can we include an outside agency that may be able to come in and sell something to us on a commission basis also? Does that make sense to you? Instead of us all of a sudden running into a situation where somebody brings us something to do, and then we gotta go all the way through the wheel and everything else.
I mean, it would just be, it's kind of like what we're doing with the coalition.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, you know, the guy in Osceola right now found the client that wants to buy all of 7 counties. So the way we do our advertising agreement is a little bit different than if we
Perfect.
sold it. Yeah.
So you have the levity to be able to do that, as long as you do, then that's awesome. You have the opportunity to do
Yeah,
that.
because really that's me selling it. I mean,
Okay, okay.
so we have.
So,
an
so the
agreement.
only decision point really is the board have the appetite for us to really run forward with expanded advertising across our district? Are you ready, prepared, and accepting of going to Rockbridge High's football and see the scoreboard with
Health first.
Dunkin' Donuts advertisements or that sort of thing?
Yeah.
I would have restrictions,
Do we
but I mean, I
have
don't
guidelines?
see bare necessities.
No, there's still 9702
There's
is
still-
still
there's
there.
still a policy and we can-
9702 is still
Does our
there.
policy clarify that we can't have big tobacco
Yes.
sponsors?
Yes.
I
And
don't
alcohol,
know.
no tobacco,
And no-
no sorry, Bud Light,
Well, no,
Stadium.
and no gambling. I tried to get the casino.
Sorry,
Hey,
Chrissy,
I
Bud
need
Light
to-
Stadium.
So, add in there, I don't care. Do you guys want to be able to wear the t-shirt of one of the sponsors during the school board meetings? I'll do it.
Are they paying us to wear
That's what I'm saying, no,
For money?
travel money
For
for the
money.
school board.
More money.
There you go.
I would suggest we'll add, monthly to the superintendent's bulletin. We'll just plan on giving you an update on where things are with advertising, who we're hearing from, what this is looking like. I mean, it's probably gonna be a little bit slow to eventually hopefully go fast and big, but we're gonna get moving right away.
Superintendent's car wrap,
Cost neutral.
right?
Pardon?
Suits
I
have a
brought
cost
this
neutral.
car in 1 minute.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, wrap his car. Do something
Mr.
obscene
Reed,
so he's
Ms.
pulling the
Foley,
papers with it.
we thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Foley, thank you, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. 150 clients and the PI program, really. We know and we appreciate how much you're doing and the goodwill that you spread throughout the community on behalf of BPS. We
I
appreciate
literally
you.
don't go to one
Event where she's not
venue
standing there.
that either she's not there or someone doesn't say,
Deborah Foley.
your Deborah Foley is amazing.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, no, I
Yep.
get that.
Never heard anything bad about you.
Ms. Foley, Ms. Foley, in the event that we are able to increase the advertising in other areas besides athletics, is there capacity for you guys to add another person with the advertising dollars that we receive? Or do you think that outsourcing it and keeping it the way it is right now is good?
Or we could do both, outsource and add another person so that Deborah doesn't,
Doesn't-
get fed up and leave us.
I think we start with outsourcing right now. We've spent enough money today.
I know, but Deborah, can you tell me?
Cost
I'm not
neutral.
spending any of our money, I'm saying, what would they like the future of their department to be? What would you like that to be?
I think that would, well, I think that given what we've seen just in this initial study about the potential revenue that's out there, the best return is to do it with a private contract.
Okay,
We did consider hiring, but once you add in fringe and everything else, it's probably, but if we discover that there is significant more potential through like the regional coalition of, and if spending more time on that would bring us in major accounts, then I would advocate for
Advocate
a
for it.
full-time, year-round
and
advertising
then,
sales
and
person.
then the increase of bandwidth and sales also increases the print surface's capacity. Are they actually paid the same way that you are, in that the revenue that they get paid to for these, all these print shops actually pays for their salaries? Are their salaries paid for on anything? Or are we paying for them and then any of the money that gets paid to them through the outside entities and schools and stuff like that falls to the bottom line? Is that how it works?
That, yeah,
So
the salaries
they're all
are
on
not paid
operating
for by
budget.
So they're all on operating budget, so like when I was buying signs when I was at Vieira High School, I had to pay a certain amount to printing services.
Mhm.
That amount of money falls to the bottom line, is what I'm hearing you say.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Why is Spectrum not here anymore?
They
I
had
know they changed, but
They had a change in their outlook on the benefit of advertising and doing high school sports.
did it have anything to do with the fact that we didn't allow them because of our policy?
No, it had more to do with, as I understand the business, that most broadcast television and Spectrum have gotten away from high school sports and sports in general,
Okay.
putting more into weather and basic news.
And then Parrish Medical was not on the top 10. Do we have a number of what they actually spend in our district?
Parish Medical?
Yeah.
They are way well. We would really like to have them do
And then
more.
what about Rockledge, whatever. it's
Regional
called.
medical.
Both Parish Medical Center and Rockledge Regional Medical Center, Stewart Health, are in the PI program. They are not advertising clients at this time.
Okay.
Argument?
No, the one guy's in the Rotary from Rockledge, and I had a conversation
Give him
with
a hard time.
Do you have any more questions?
It matters.
No, good.
You're gonna give me a Kit Kat if I stop talking?
No, just, we have still another presenter and our meeting,
Okay, I'm
our
done.
next meeting is
That's
supposed to start
done.
10 minutes ago.
I'm done.
Are you done?
Yep.
Anybody have any other questions? No. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
great job.
Thank you very much.
We are now going to hear from Chris Moore, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, who will provide us an RBT update, which should only take 5 to 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
sorry, security, those that are here for this next security meeting, we are running behind as usual.
I just wanted to let you know, but yeah, we had our the board meeting and we talked about kind of the timeline that we'd be able to move forward on the RBT process. So we had a team meeting. It involved risk management, it involved legal, ESE administrative support, which is our compliance branch, ESE program support, which is our what happens in our classrooms, our behavior analyst, the person who's in charge of our behavior analyst, as well as student services. So we reviewed our current practice and process as it relates to outside vendors. Outside contract providers. We actually already have 2 different processes for that. And so we started surveying our principals, and there was a great deal of confusion about what process related to what kind of provider. So we generated a presentation and went to our recent leadership team meeting and presented that to our principals, which helped us really solidify some of the things that we needed to do, just in terms of what questions they still had, what pieces and parts of the process they didn't understand, and what we needed to do to make sure this was successful moving forward. So we met on October 22nd. We made sure that we all looked over the Broward RBT packet. We started generating suggestions to that packet based on our current risk management and legal standards, as well as in the light of our current processes and the information that we got from our principals at our meeting. We made suggestions to that packet. We determined that the 3 processes that we had in place were too many, and as we looked at the Broward parent packet from a risk management, legal, and really communication standpoint, it was really the gold standard. It really took away any question as to who does what and who's responsible for what and how we act in this setting and how we communicate with one another. But it did need some edits, and we did need to bring it into compliance with, like I said, our risk management and legal practices. We determined that we did want to put the basically the edited Broward model in place for 2019-20, but in addition we looked at it and said, this is the practice we really want to see moving forward for all of our outside vendors. So we're looking at putting it in place starting in August for all of our outside vendors. Most of those vendors have already been approved. They're already verified and on our website, so we didn't want to go back and ask them to do anything else. We're meeting again in November. We're going to solidify November 7th to be exact. We're solidifying all of our edits. We are approving the final document to bring to you guys on November 18th. We want to create a fillable document. We want to get with ET and make sure it's posted correctly. We want to make sure that we create a flow chart to answer all of the questions and concerns our principal had. I don't know if you know how many different forms and processes have come at them this year. So as clear as we can make it to not add a burden to them is our wish, and we really want to make sure that we build in some training for our principals. So we'll come to you guys on November 18th with our finished document saying this is what we want to do. I will tell you, we've been in communication with the state. Our latest communication with the state came today. They wrote us and said at this point they have no further information and the decision is a local decision. So we're happy with that. We want to take November, the end part of November after we meet with you and get that final document out to you to really put all of the pieces in place, put the training in place, get that flow chart written, address any concerns that anybody has, and then we want to present it to the principals at the December LTM. We're going to probably want about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, because based on our last presentation, they're going to have questions and they're going to be a little bit confused as to what this new thing is, why we're doing it now, why we're putting something in midstream, who's responsible for what. And most especially, I think the biggest question to them is, once this paperwork all goes to risk management, how does the communication flow back downhill to the school so that they know that they're allowing somebody that's been approved in? And we want to be ready to go second semester with an RBT approved process. So that's our timeline and goal, and I just wanted to give you that update, get some pushback or feedback from you guys on where you guys are at. But we think if we do it that way, we can make sure that we get the right documents out. They have all of the right people that have provided input to them, and we can really train our schools and our principals so they don't get confused and start pushing two or three different processes together in their head when they really are separate this year, and next year we're going to combine them all together.
So I feel like you've come right off the heart screening situation.
Right into
directly
another one.
into another one. So for me, thank you. I realize we have put you on scramble, get these things done quick, and you've met the task, so thank you. We'll go down to Ms. Melford because this has been her baby. Do you have any comments, questions?
I would like to take a look at let me back up. Thank you, because I know that this has been, it's been an undertaking and lots of challenges along the way. And I appreciate all that you all have done in this area immensely. I would like to see the document or process that you're recommending at this point, just because I'm curious as to how we morphed from the Broward to what we're now looking at doing. So I would just like to take a look at that when you feel like it's ready for me to do so.
I can actually send you the version we're going to be looking at on November 7th
Okay.
right now. I can send it to all of you,
Awesome.
as well as our current overview for outside preventers, which breaks down our current two processes.
Lovely.
So I can send both of that to you guys this evening.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. I do have some concerns that we pulled supports in August, and we're not looking at supports being back in place, if I'm understanding correctly, until January.
That's our projected timeline. I will tell you that one of the lessons learned from rush to get stuff done is that we leave confusion in our wake, and it does cost us in the short term when we do that. So I will tell you that the certified behavior analysts are still in place. They are still allowed to serve our students in our schools. Trying to get this process set and in place is just going to take the time it takes to get the paperwork right and to get our schools trained and to make sure that we have all of those pieces in place. So that's what our goal is. You know, if you guys say get it done quicker, we'll do our best to move to get it done quicker.
I would very much like to see it done quicker. But wait, don't write anything down yet. I would very much like to see it done quicker. I don't want to create additional problems or challenges, and I certainly don't want to push you into nervous breakdown mode. That is the last thing that I want to do. And so I'm juggling with all of those considerations. My question, I guess, would be, is there, and maybe after I see the documents and the previous processes, maybe I could make a more clear or beneficial recommendation. But is there, for an example, a way that we could do a temporary waiver to get those supports back in place prior to January without creating unnecessary risk, I guess, would potentially be? Like, is there?
I'd have to get with risk management and legal again. Most of that language doesn't come from student services, it comes from
But we'd have to do the background checks and all
risk
that stuff,
management
and have to
and
make
legal.
sure that that was in place. That's one thing that I think of originally.
And those, I would think, if there were people who are already in schools, would have already had the background checks in place.
Yes, and yes, they do, period, the end. That was part of the original process. Some of the nuance of the statute language versus what's going on is that not every RT has to be licensed. You need to be licensed in order to collect on Medicaid dollars. The language of the statute says in order to go into school, you have to be licensed in order to go into school. So we need to ensure that this person, just by virtue of them being an RT, isn't licensed, but by virtue of their collecting the Medicaid dollars, they have to be licensed, and the statute says they have to be licensed. So there's some pieces in this that don't apply to those people, whether they're speech and language pathologists or OT or anybody else covered under this outside provider language that are licensed already and we know about. So, and then the RTs work under the direction of a certified behavior analyst, as you know. And so the language didn't exist in what we used to do to ensure that we were communicating with who they worked under and that person was communicating back to us the behavior plans. There was a huge communication piece that was missing that caused us problems. That caused some significant problems first semester that we addressed individually that we think we can eliminate with the packet. I'd have to work with Mark Leindorf and Amy to say whether there is some stopgap measure we can take between October, whatever today is, 29th and December 15th, which is basically, I think, the last day of first semester.
Okay. Well, you and I can talk, and
Okay.
and I'll talk with Ms. Endel, and after I take a look at those, we can.
All right.
But thank you.
Yeah.
I know you've been amazing.
Thank you.
Is there, if we get this set for second semester, is it something where you think the timeline will be that the application process will be available so that parents can go ahead and get that turned in and where it can be approved so that
Oh,
first
we
day of
want-
first semester
yeah.
we're ready to roll?
Yeah, we want to have all that done before we leave second semester. Like we want the forms fillable, which they're not now. We want them uploaded. We want them online. We want all of that piece done. So out of the gate on January 9th, I think is our first day back, first semester, that those processes have been in place. One of the questions and concerns that the schools had was with the turnaround time from risk management to approve to get to the schools. Risk management has been able to, and this is why we really need the flow chart, has weighed in and said there shouldn't be a turnaround time there. We're the collector of the information. All the I's have been dotted and T's have been checked by the time it comes to us. So, as an organization, we still need to sit down and say, well, what does that flow chart look like so that the schools aren't being delayed for something that they think we're doing and we think the schools have started. So that's part of the work that has to happen between now and then because all of these things are legislated and we go, oh, okay, we're going to do it. And then we have 2 and 3 and 4 sometimes different processes that intend to do the same thing, but they don't quite, and we never bring them together, and we never really sit down strategically and think, how is this best rolled out?
Gotcha.
We're trying to be a little bit more strategic.
I just want to make sure it wasn't that the application process was going to be available after Christmas.
No,
That it would be actually before so that we can be ready to have people in classrooms.
Our goal, quite frankly, if we can get the training piece done, which we really want to do at the LTM with the principals, I don't know what day it is. Do you know, December 5th. That's really our key hinge point is, do the schools know what's coming out and do they know how it flows and do they know how to use it and do they know what to expect? Once we know that communication gap has been closed, we're golden.
I just want to say thank you very much, and I don't want to rush this process. I really don't. We have holidays in here. We've got Thanksgiving. We've got the winter break. So it's a small timeline, and I don't want to have the same experience we've had with who we played for. That's the bottom line. I want this done well, and I like the flow chart, I like the training, I appreciate what your department's doing. And I know I reached out to Dr.
Fontan.
Fantan, and I asked her, I said, so what's a reasonable, when do you think? And she said she would like to do it in January. Next semester, so.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
caused her a heart attack when she was like, 2 to 4 weeks, Chris, we can't do this in 2 to 4 weeks. I said, well, we need to get started and we need to let everybody know kind of the process and where we're going because, if this is the direction we're going, it needs to move along. So, yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Ms. Moore. Any further business? No further business, the meeting is adjourned.